Okay, let's see. Just make 1, 2. Okay, I see that all the directors are here, so we can begin the meeting. So I call this regular meeting of the Cambria Community Services District to order. All 5 directors present. Staff present are GM Weigold, Alice Mendoza, Melissa Bland, Pam Duffield, and Ray Dienzo. In addition, we have Bill Statler and Jeff Claren here to assist us when we get to the discussion of the one of the regular agenda items. Welcome, everybody. And at this point, we also have a fairly large community of attendees. So let us commence with the Pledge of Allegiance. So Mrs. Riedel, if you go ahead and display the flag for us. Thank you. So I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United
States of America
and to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty
and justice for all.
All right. As I said, we have a quorum present, so we can do business. And my president's report today is very, very brief. Namely, I don't have a lot to say. So I think we can move directly here to the agenda additions and deletions. And I believe that prior arrangement here, we'd like to move 7C ahead of 7A so that our consultants won't have to wade through all of our other business. So do we have any objection to changing the order of business? All right, seeing none, we'll do that. So everybody, when we get to regular business, we'll commence with the discussion of the solid waste collection and disposal fees. So presently, do we have any board member communications? Any things the board members would like to say to the public or to each other? All right. Yes, Director Farmer.
Yes, I'd like to make a comment. This is following up on my future agenda item from last week. When I recommended that the board, as soon as possible, act upon declaring a stage 4 water emergency. We're at a stage 2 right now. So I took the time to look back and see, well, when did we declare a stage 4 last year? Well, it was actually on July 15th. This year, the well levels in San Simeon are lower than they were a year ago. We've had less rain than we did a year ago. We've had some complications with regard to the main water line, with regard to the well at SR4. The circumstances now are even a bit more problematic with regard to the availability of water for this community. And I just want to encourage the board to act as quickly, as expeditiously as possible, putting this on the agenda and declaring a stage 4 water emergency. State parks, Hearst Castle State Parks, the most popular state park in the state of California with regard to tourism, has closed their restrooms. They are now using porta potties. I know we did that in the past when things became difficult here. We are probably going to have more tourism this year than we did last year. So I think you get my point, and we need to act upon this, and I hope we do so at the first meeting in August. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director Farmer. Any additional board member communication? All right, seeing none, we'll move directly to public comment. So this is a reminder to everybody that this is comment on items not on the agenda. And again, as has been my former practice here, I'm going to read the list of attendees just because the folks out there can't see each other, so they don't really know who else is watching. So actually, before I commence that, I do see some hands coming up on the director's side, so I think I'll go to them first and then come back to the public. So starting with Vice President Dean.
I think we skipped the public safety reports.
Oh, we certainly did. Thank you. Director Steidel, was that? Thank you. Thank you for catching me on that one. So we'll commence with the Sheriff Department's report. Do we have anyone from the Sheriff's Department here today? I'm not seeing anybody. Let me check here for a second. Okay, I think then we can move directly to the fire chief's report. So I think Michael Berkey, would I correct to address you as Captain Berkey? Would that be correct? I just want to know, I want to use the right title.
Yeah, either one. Interim fire chief, Captain Berkey. I'm filling both roles, so
Okay, thank you.
Would be absolutely correct.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Before you begin, I still see a couple of hands up, so let me take those and then we'll come back to you. So thank you. Sorry, Vice President Dean and then Mr. Carmel.
I'm sorry, Mr. McDonald is in the attendees to do the sheriff's report.
Oh, I'm sorry, I see him there. Okay, Mr. McDonald, okay, in a moment we'll bring you, yeah, Leah, could you go ahead and bring him in as a panelist? Thank you, and then let's, Mr.
He
Carmel.
is in.
Okay, we're very good. So Mr. Carmel, did that take care, is that, okay.
That was my
So
fault.
let's, again, just because it's, so bear with me here, Captain Berkey, let me start with Captain McDonald first. So please, Mr. McDonald, the floor is yours.
Hi, good afternoon. Can you hear me? Excellent. Okay. This is the combined report for May and June of this year. So the numbers will seem a little larger today, but they are combined May and June. During that period of time, we had 7 assault and battery calls, 5 of which were domestic violence related. We had 16 disturbance calls. 5 of those were for loud music. 1 was a fireworks complaint, and 10 general disturbances. We had 2 burglaries during that 2-month period. 1 was a commercial burglary and 1 was a residential burglary. We had 7 thefts reported, and those were all associated with residential properties. We had 7 vandalisms reported, 4 of which involved vehicles, 2 involved residences, and 1 was a report of graffiti on street signs in the downtown area, mostly in the East Village. We had 0 mail thefts reported, 0 phone scams reported, a total of 25 suspicious circumstances. That's things like suspicious vehicles, suspicious subjects, and then suspected criminal activity, as well as just general suspicious circumstances. Over the course of the 2 months, there were 28 enforcement stops conducted by the deputies that serve your community. 27 of those were vehicle stops, and 1 of those was a pedestrian stop. And then for that 2-month period, there were 29 proactive patrol activities. That's things like foot patrols, extra patrols, patrol checks, bar checks, that sort of thing. And with that, that concludes my report, and I'm available for any questions from the directors or the members of the public.
Excellent. Thank you, Captain McDonald. So let's start with the directors. Do you folks have any questions for Captain McDonald? Okay, seeing, oh, yes, Director Farmer.
Yes, I'd like to ask the captain, Captain McDonald, have you had any, and I'm a little bit reluctant to ask this, but have you had any problems in the past month with any of our local homeless residents?
Not per se. There was, I know that there was some, like for instance, at least one of these assault batteries was a domestic violence circumstance between 2 homeless people that hang out mostly in the East Village area.
Right. That's what I was referencing.
Okay. And then other than that, I haven't seen a specific uptick in the problems. I mean, obviously, they're an ongoing issue within the community, but and today actually I heard a car dispatched up there, so I'll be looking at that circumstance. But for the prior 2 months, I haven't noticed a real uptick in transient related issues.
Well, as I said, it was just that one particular incident. And since you didn't mention it, I just wanted to follow up on it. So thank you very much.
Okay, anyone else from the board wish to talk to Captain McDonald? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to the public. I see 2 hands up. So this is questions for Captain McDonald, questions or observations. This will be, okay, Tina Dickinson, please.
Thank you, President Howell. Yeah, a quick question for the captain on the incident that occurred on San Simeon Creek Road, where an individual hit a power pole and I believe fled from the scene. He was traveling in a car and hit it. And I know that Park Hill, I think 1,254 customers lost power, and San Simeon Creek Road customers lost power. We lost it until from 8:15 at night until 11:15 in the evening, but they lost power till about, I think it returned at about 8 a.m. in the morning the next day. So did they ever locate this individual and find out more with investigation, that incident?
Yeah.
So I apologize. I don't have information on that incident. Any traffic collisions like that are handled by the California Highway Patrol out of the Templeton office. That is something I certainly can inquire about and bring information back at our next meeting. But I'm not familiar with what the resolution was on that particular incident.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Captain McDonald. Let's see. I see no further questions. So thank you so much for your report. Looking forward to seeing you next month.
All right. You take care.
Thank you. All right. Now let's see. Okay. Okay, Captain Berkey, it's your turn now. So you have the floor.
Excellent. Well, thanks, you guys. Bear with me, as this is my first kind of time kind of working through this. So I apologize if it's a little bit disheveled, but I'll get through it and hopefully get you guys the information that you need. So to start off with, in June, the prevention and education has pretty much been put on hold. Like I said, we don't have anybody here that's a prevention officer. Also with planning, we're kind of putting that on hold too. We're kind of working, I've been working with the general manager on trying to come up with a plan with that as far as what we're going to do in the meantime. So we're working on it diligently, and so we should have that going pretty soon. With the meetings and affiliations, we had an HR meeting June 27th. That was really it. As far as the operations and news, the SLO County EOC opened and running for COVID-19 disaster declaration. Most of this stuff is already, not a whole lot of changes to this. So the weekly coordination between EOC, public health, and county fire chiefs continues. The station continues to be closed to public. All public events, prevention activities, and educational tours are canceled because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Training for the month of June was primarily focused on orientation for the new SAFER personnel and the annual wildland fire training and engineer testing. So we're trying to maintain, a lot of that stuff. The grant updates, let's see, not a lot of updates here. As we were awarded the AFG supplemental COVID-19 PPE grant, the SLO OES grant for mobile radio replacement. The purchase is in progress with that. Equipment purchases in progress for the first one as well. The SAFER grant, obviously, we've had that going since January 1st. Zone Haven evacuation grant, same thing. And the HMGP grant, it's submitted and it's at the state and federal for review. As far as the monthly incident statistics, We have, for the month of June, we had 3 total fires. We had 2 vegetation fires and 1 other fire. Usually that ends up being like a dumpster fire or something along those. I believe that's what it was actually. It was kind of a fire that was in a driveway that was in a dumpster area. Let's see, we have 53 total rescue and EMS calls, 2 motor vehicle accidents, 2 ocean rescue calls. Those happen to be our first of the year. And then we had our hazardous conditions are just spills, gas leaks, electrical problems. We had 4 of those total. So electrical problems, and then other hazards are usually like power lines down, or they come down as like a power lines down type incident. And then they end up being, cable lines or something different. And then we had service calls. Those are the water leaks, the, public service assists kind of usually fill up most of those. And that's exactly in this case, the same thing. So we had 15 public service assists. That's anything from a lift assist to smoke detectors to, anything really going on that they just need our help with. So, yeah, and then there was another one, 15 false alarms or good intent calls. So that's pretty much in line. If I'm looking back at the year, that's pretty much in line with kind of where we've been going. A little bit more, a little bit less throughout the year so far, but that's pretty much in line with how we've been going. So, yeah, I think that's pretty much it as far as the report goes. And you can see the incidents by time of day, incidents time of week, that kind of stuff. All the stats are there for you. I tried to get all of that lined up how the previous chief had been doing it. So if I can just to kind of piggyback on all of this, just for the short time that I've been in this seat, and obviously I've been with the department for quite a while now. So the biggest issue that I see kind of coming in, foreseeable future, right now we have a critical staffing level. So there's a lot of moving parts to that. But and matter of fact, even the fact that I'm sitting in this seat is obviously that's a big issue. So we want to make sure that I'm a little nervous about our safer guys that have come in, because I want to make sure that there's a plan in place so they don't lose their job in 3 years. So I want to make sure that we're securing the funding for them. And I realize it's 3 years out, but the planning starts now. We need to make sure that we have some sort of just a plan in place for that. So I don't want that to happen again. And like I said, right now our staffing, we're to say that they're stressed out right now as far as just working overtime, and you'll see it in the budget how much overtime it's costing the district. It's astronomical. So we need to make sure that we can figure out some way to mitigate that. And I think that's probably the biggest concern that I have right now. Like I said, just sitting in this seat for the short time that I've been here, and then as a fire captain and as an engineer prior to that, that's what we've been seeing pretty consistently. So administrative support is 100% necessary up here. We couldn't do it without the current admin support that we've been having. And that's something that I can definitely see needing more of. So just wanted to voice my opinion on that, and hopefully answer any questions from you guys or the public, or go from there. Hopefully that will suffice.
Perfect. Well, let's see what the board has to say first, and then we'll go to the public. So board members, do you have anything you wish to communicate here, questions or observations? Director Farmer.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. First off, your first ocean rescue calls of the year. Could you give us just a little bit more detail about what those were?
Yeah, so usually right at the beginning, June area, we start getting a lot of influx, the summer influx from the, from the inland residents come over, and a lot of them are very inexperienced and don't understand the kind of the water area, and so that's exactly what happened. So a couple of them got caught off in the fog. The fog rolled in super quick, and they got lost, couldn't find the shore. And so, somebody was able to call. Most of them these days have their cell phones, which is incredible. So the kayakers will call from their cell phone and say, hey, I'm out here somewhere. We don't know where we're really at. And so that's what the one was. And then, of course, with us responding out there, very, very dangerous for us as well, because we're going to get caught in the same situation with the fog. So we need to be careful when we're responding out there. But we've have the training to kind of keep us safe for that. The other one, I believe, was same thing. It was a super windy day up in I think they launched at the Elephant Seals, and they ended up getting, pushed all the way down just about a mile off of the San Simeon Point there. So we were able to launch our boats off of San Simeon and go out and bring them in. We were successfully able to get them and then tow their kayaks in. And I don't think they missed any fish that day either. So we were super happy about that. But yeah, so those were the two calls. That's pretty typical. We've gone, we'll get dispatched to, call down in Cayucas, but we don't typically record it as an ocean rescue because we never perform those tasks. So usually they're false calls. Somebody will call, saying, hey, we see somebody out in the water, and it's, they're not actually in distress. Somebody just saw them maybe struggling a little bit, and then we get there and they're already in. And so that ends up going under the false call or false alarm statistic.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. My goodness. Okay, Vice President Dean.
Hi, Captain Berkey. So you mentioned you're at critical staffing levels and your personnel are stressed out regarding overtime. Is this because you have still do not have enough staff even with the safer firefighters, or is it because you have people out due to COVID or a lack of reserves? Why are you experiencing all this overtime?
Yeah, so what we have right now, we have one fire captain that's out on workman's comp injury. And so that required us to pull one of the engineers up from their engineer position into an acting position. And so that opened up a position in the engineer spot. And so now with the vacant position in both, we were tried to do that to try and eliminate, because at the time, like if the captain's position was open, then there was only two captains, myself and another one that could fill that position. So when we moved the fire engineer acting captain up into that position, we tried to open it up so all of us could work that overtime, maybe alleviate some of that. And that's probably the biggest issue right now is that. And then obviously myself. So the fire chief, with me doing both duties, I mean, right now I'm on duty, I'm still filling the fire captain's role. So to say I'm not able to really to do both is very difficult to fill the captain's role and the fire chief role. So the SAFER grant has extremely, it has helped. I can't even express how much that has helped. My biggest concern is that we solidify those positions, to eventually, like I said, to fund them in the next 2 to 3 years whenever we need that funding solidified. As far as the overtime for them, there has been our minimal staffing is 3, and so we've had times where we've fallen below that, and that we're struggling to find people to come in and cover those shifts. Whether it's sick call, it is, there is COVID for sure. The precautions are there for that, but even just generally speaking, covering shifts has always been relatively difficult with the minimal staffing. So does that answer your question? I'm sorry if I'm
No. Yes, it answered my questions. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Captain Berkey. Let's see, do we have anything more from the board? And let's see. Okay, moving to the public, I do see one hand up. So Ms. Breedall, if you could bring in Crosby and Laura Swartz.
Good afternoon, President Howell. Wonder if Acting Chief Berkey could provide some additional details about the fire up on San Simeon Creek Road not long ago.
Okay, Captain Berkey.
Yeah, so that ended up being, I don't know the details of how it started and what all went into it, but it ended up being less than an acre. So it was very, very small. They were able to mitigate that very, very quickly. We did respond to our water tender up there, and I don't believe they were even really utilized. If anything, it was for a very short time. So they were able to, like I said, the CAL FIRE responded immediately, and they were able to have it knocked down very quickly.
Great, thank
I
you.
believe they had crews, in any fire situation, they had crews out there for an extended period just to watch for, any sort of flare-ups or anything like that. But so if you did see any fire activity out there after that, that's what that was for.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Captain Berkey. Okay, I see. Please bring in Elizabeth Bettenhausen.
Thank you very much, President Howell. I want to thank Interim Chief Berkey for your report, sir, and reflecting on it. I thought it was very instructive for us to hear what your analysis is of the situation of the department, as well as hearing the details again. I also want to ask 2 questions. I know in the past, the fire department has been wonderfully notorious for applying for grants and somehow doing this in the dark, or not certainly transparently, but I don't know how you all manage that. And I'm wondering if you're figuring out a way to continue that, because it's so often supported by your financial needs as a department. And the second question is, I'm sure that the website must contain this, but I thought I'd just ask the question of you directly. What is the appointment process for a new fire chief? And so what steps are being taken now, and by whom, in order to get this completed? Is the final say then the board of directors voting on a budget change, or what lies before us in hiring the new full-time fire chief? Thank you. Excellent presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, Captain Berkey, maybe answer part of that question and then pass it over to GM Weigold for the second half.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for that question. And the grants, yeah, we're constantly looking for that on our end. I can tell you, Captain Torlano has been our ace in the hole, so to speak, for our past grant writing. She's been really, really diligent about getting those out. And she's been the sole purpose why we have them. She's been working with other grant writers in the county, but that's all on her. She's been, like I said, she's been 100% leading the path on that. And so I got to give her all the credit for that. She is still working at that. It clearly with our kind of plates being as full as they are, she's amazingly able to still complete them. So I like I said, hats off to her. She's still working on them diligently. She's constantly giving me updates on where they're at and how long they're going to take. And that's the problem with them. Most of the time they do take quite a while to be processed, depending on the grant. But it can be quite a while before we actually get them from the time that we apply. With that, yeah, I'll pass it over to GM Weigold and
Okay.
awesome. Yeah.
Thank you, Captain Berkey. So, yeah, GM Weigold, I think it'd be appropriate to go ahead and answer Ms. Bettenhausen's question at this point.
As far as, I'll just add to Captain Berkey's note on the grants, that's certainly in the next fire chief a component of experience that we're looking for the next fire chief. As far as the process goes, we completed the first round of interviews and we're proceeding to the second round, which will consist of 2 panels. And that's set up for mid-August.
Okay. Thank you, GM Weigold. Any additional questions from the public? Ms. Dickerson, please.
Thank you, President Howell. I don't think that, in fact, I know that the GM did not answer all of what Elizabeth Bettenhausen was asking. And that is, I think, who are the members of the panel? Don't we have a right to know who are on these panels? I thought that was part of the question. Anyway, I'd like to know.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Dickinson. I don't know, GM Weigold, if you want to answer that, you may, but otherwise we can deal with that in a separate, at a different time.
I think I'd prefer to do that at a separate time.
Okay, thank you.
And, President Howell, before we go to the next subject, I'd just like to have our board secretary review some of the new features that are in process at the moment with this Zoom session.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yes, so Ms. Rinal, could you go ahead and enlighten us?
Sure. I just wanted to let everyone know we have live captioning, and you might notice that on your Zoom screens at the bottom. It's transcribing as we speak into the meeting.
Wow.
And that is for the benefit of those who are perhaps hearing impaired or have other individual needs that would benefit from that.
Excellent, excellent.
I think, President Howell, if members can't see that, on the very bottom of your screen, you can click on live transcript.
Yeah.
And you can either open and close the transcript there.
I just did it here, and I see we can show subtitles, or you can see the full transcript, or there's a setting. So yeah, folks, you want to explore that. It's especially good if your reception is garbled or anything. So thank you for that. That's I saw that this morning and kind of wondered what is going on. So thank you for and thank you, Ms. Riedel, and whoever helped to get that feature going. I think we have finished the public comment for this particular item. And so again, I'm ready to move forward to the general public comment on this point. So again, as is my former practice, I'll let everybody know who's here. So these are everybody who's got at least first and last names. There's a total of 13 attendees watching this. And so we have Elizabeth Bettenhausen, Michael Thomas, Alan Dean, Christine Heinrichs, Crosby and Laura Swartz, Dennis Dudzik, Heather Garland, Ken Carey, Stuart McDonald, who's still with us, and Tina Dickinson and William Skinner. So we have here ready to speak, we have Elizabeth Bettenhausen, followed by Michael Thomas.
Thank you, President Howell. I had raised my hand, although I recognized that I was no longer in order. But I did want to say regarding the live transcript that you can also save sections of that, which for some of us will relieve us of the necessity of listening ourselves and trying to transcribe an accurate transcript. So I don't know whose responsibility this was, if Leah or who it was, but thank you beyond the height of January surf.
Okay, very good. Okay, was that it, Ms. Bettenhausen?
Yes, yes.
Well, thank you for that. It's an excellent point that you make there. Okay, so it'll be Michael Thomas, followed by Christine Heinrichs.
Good. Thank you, President Howell, and still chuckling from Ms. Bettenhausen's surf comment. Considering the board's emphasis on increasing transparency, after lots of next door discussion, the community consensus about the helicopter traffic a couple weeks ago, the week of July 11, I think was likely PG&E preparations for their upcoming survey of power line encroachment. This seems to be an activity about which CCSD should have been informed in advance. And so a great opportunity for something like this, for CCSD to communicate to the public in advance, put that out through next door, rather than everybody hunting and wondering what's going on. This could easily be a way to communicate. And as I was looking at all that helicopter traffic, wondering, yeah, so how would we communicate once again if there is a fire? And this would be something like that would be a great opportunity to practice communicating with the public.
Good point. Okay, thank you, Mr. Thomas. Yeah, that certainly does bear some looking into. Let's see, this will be Christine Heinrichs, followed by Tina Dickinson.
Thank you. And yes, I noticed that that live transcript, and it's wonderful. And I was unaware of the feature that Dr. Bettenhausen mentioned of allowing us to download a transcript. That's a wonderful feature, and I look forward to using it. And thank you for announcing the attendees and for commenting on that, President Howell. And actually, I intended to give this part of the comment later in the meeting, but since you raised the subject, I'll address it now. Remote meetings are good, but the board has chosen a Zoom setting that prevents the public from seeing everyone who's attending. District Council Carmel has told the past 3 board presidents that they can, at their preference, expand the meeting to show all who are attending. None of them has offered any explanation as to why you don't. The board's first priority in its strategic plan is to improve and increase public communication. I appreciate your announcing who is attending, President Howell, but you could make that change today to allow all to see who is attending. This seems like a simple and basic step to take, and I ask you to make this change today. Thank you. Next, recognizing that the January 6th committee's last public hearing will be televised starting at 5 o'clock this afternoon, I ask the board to make every effort to conclude its meeting well before 5 to allow all of us to watch it. Thank you.
Ms. Heinrichs. Okay, Ms. Dickinson.
There we go. Thank you. Thank you, President Howell. In public comment, it says future agenda items can be suggested at this time. So since the areas, 2 areas I'm going to be bringing up are not included in the agenda, I'm going to comment on them today, right at this point. So one is the unbelievable amount of tourists that we're seeing in town. I mean, somebody told me they came down to their second home here, went into town to have lunch, could not find a parking place, and picked up some groceries and took them back to the home to fix a meal. I know that I'm having a special, I don't go into the West Village too often, but the East Village, it's real, unless, you know, I'm a banking customer at the bank there, so I'm able to use the bank and then park for a little bit, but it's getting to be really difficult. So, okay, so way more tourism. And yesterday I was down on Moonstone Beach Drive, and I mean, it was just unbelievable, the amount of people there, unbelievable. So my question is, we have all this tourism, Hearst Castle's open, blah, 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 but we're still in a stage 2. So I'd like to know when that may be looked at more seriously, and we'll still be allowed to water, you know, 3 times a week, 15 minutes at a time, when folks down in Southern California are allowed 20 minutes a week, once a week. That just makes me have a huge question in my mind. The second item, while I was taking my walk down Moonstone Beach Drive all the way down to the end, I saw construction equipment at the north end of Moonstone Beach Drive and across the street, across Highway 1 at Dow. So we do know that when Dow bought that property, there was talk of them being connected to the sewer. So it looks as if the construction and that project might be, well, it's the equipment's there, be starting up, but I don't see that in the utility manager's report. So just as a heads up, in case you're not even aware of it. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Dickinson. Okay, next will be Dennis Studzik.
Thank you, President Howell. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, yes.
I wanted to thank Director Farmer for his comment about the board considering the stage 4. And I think as Ms. Dickinson said, it's really time to make the public aware of the situation and what how the urgency of them taking action to mitigate. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ducey. Okay, do we have any additional public comment? All right, seeing none, let us just continue on. There were some interesting points here, but I don't want to take the time right now to deal with them. Some of these I can communicate with you individually, some of the answers to your questions. Save us some time today so we can all hopefully get out in time to watch the hearing if we're so interested. We are now ready for the manager's report, and so it'll be the general manager's report first, and I'll take public comment. I think I'll take public comment before the report, so I'm going to assume that everybody watching this meeting has already read the report, and so this would be an opportunity for you to ask questions which the general manager might choose to answer, may choose to answer if he wishes. So we'll go with the public comment first, and I see Christine Heinrichs followed by Michael Thomas.
Thank you. Mr. Weigel reports that he is, quote, reestablishing the role of assistant general manager. He does not say what this position would require in compensation or whether the position of the employee he proposes to fill the position, Melissa Bland, would then be filled by a new employee. The district is already top-heavy with administration. Finance manager Pam Duffield recently moved up to a new position, administrative department manager, and her position was filled with a new employee. Mr. Weigel does not say why this new position is needed. For several months, he managed his responsibilities to the board's satisfaction, working part-time, spending a day or two a week at another job, lecturing in Connecticut. He is often off-site. If he finds that he is unable to fulfill his responsibilities without an assistant, I suggest that the board encourage him to spend full time at the district before determining that he needs an assistant. If Mr. Weigel is not able to commit his full time to the position of general manager and an assistant is required, perhaps Mr. Weigel's compensation should be reduced to reflect that and result in no additional staff cost to the district. District Counsel Tim Carmel informed the board at the July 14th meeting that while they have no direct control over staff positions, they can simply decline to fund the position. I hope the board will take Mr. Carmel's advice and refuse to fund this additional expense. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Heinrichs. Next will be Michael Thomas.
President Howell, I assume this will include the facilities and resource manager.
Yes, thank you for asking. Yes, it definitely does.
Well, thanks. I just wanted to comment. I coordinate the invasive species removal program for the Friends of Fiscalina Ranch Preserve, which folks affectionately refer to as the Wednesday Weeders. And I just want to comment what a pleasure it is working with branch manager Carlos, Alberto, and Martine. While our volunteers focus on hand pulling the invasive species, the mustard, radish, thistles, French broom, all of the invasives that would crowd out our beautiful natives, such as the lupins, coastal sea daisies, and poppies. But it's Carlos and his crew that do the real heavy lifting in areas that our volunteers just can't get to. So, I mean, just about every week or so, I send Carlos a list of areas that I have found are getting out of hand. And it seems like before I can turn around, the next time I'm out on the ranch, Carlos and his crew are out there, or they've been there with their heavy equipment knocking down the weeds. So just thank you, Carlos, Alberto, and Martine.
Okay. Oh, well, thank you, Michael Thomas. Thank you. Yes, our appreciation goes out to those folks. I know they work very hard to keep everything trimmed and our wonderful open space in good shape. So let's see, we have Tina Dickerson followed by Elizabeth Bettenhausen.
Thank you, President Howell. Under item 5A, the general manager's report, I really do have a question about the second item titled Assistant General Manager, and I quote from that. That item, quote, I am reestablishing the role of Assistant General Manager to more effectively balance the administration duties, end of quote. Last week, at the beginning of the meeting, Mr. Weigold made an announcement at the beginning of the meeting, and one of the three items he brought up was the need maybe for an assistant general manager, and he used the word then that he was reconstructing the role. Now he's using the word reestablishing. So I'd like to know where the reestablishment or reconstruction of this position is coming from. And I also would agree with Ms. Heinrich's comments. I do not believe there's a need for an assistant general manager for a town of 5,700. And I would like to see the general manager take his position more seriously and have a greater commitment to his position. Mr. Weigold has been, missing in action much of the time that he has been employed here now for over 3 years. And this board, I've asked you, I've made comments about it many times. Others have as well. Mr. Weigold needs to be here working at his position so that there is no need for an assistant general manager. There is no need. He needs to just get the job done for what he was hired to do. And I find it really offensive that this is in the agenda for today, because there's no action that can be taken from this simple sentence here. And I don't really know what the board can even say about it. It doesn't mention a description of the position. It doesn't have a salary range. So what can the board do? Just look at it and ignore it? I don't know. Thank you, President Howell.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Dickinson. Let us have Elizabeth Bettenhausen, please.
Thank you very much, President Howell. I bring to your attention the memo I sent to you on the 17th of July and to all the board. Within that memo, I say, when I quote what the general manager says in his report today about more effectively balancing the administration duties, I say, what does this mean? What duties need to be balanced? When the budget adjustment item comes before you to specify the amount the assistant general manager will be paid and how that affects the fiscal year 2022-23 budget, I ask you to require the general manager to provide a more specific description of the position of assistant general manager and how that affects the work of the general manager and why it is needed now. I request that you require the budget amendment to stipulate also how the positions Ms. Bland has held to date will be affected. In addition, what are these positions now to be filled by a new staff person? I assume the final approval of the fiscal year 2022-23 budget at your meeting on the 18th of August 2022 is the latest time this can be done. Several meetings ago, I made a public comment asking you for information on what exactly General Manager Weigold does. I know you have had closed session reviews of his work. His reports to you each month list minimally what departments, supervisors, and managers with their staff have done. But what exactly does the general manager do? I have received no response to that email and to that public comment. In the past, some general managers have done careful analytical work to pose major questions about needs and resources to the board of directors. I see none of this now. What specifically does this general manager do? And I refer to the fire chief's report this morning. That analysis at the end of his report was an excellent example of how the person in charge should reflect on the situation. And when I moved here, the interim general manager gave wonderful reflections on water use in Cambria and the CCSD. That was Vern Hamilton. Since then, I have been hard pressed to find a general manager who does that kind of careful analytical work of all that he or she oversees. I thank you for your public service and your serious consideration of the major fiscal issues and staff appointments that are before us at your coming meetings and as always. And I look forward to the specificity of what the general manager does and what his appointees are expected to do by him in the same near future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Vittenhausen. If I can get this thing to shut. There it is. Sorry. Technology. Okay, any further comments here? Seeing none, I think we're ready to commence with the general manager's report. Thank you. Mr. Weigel, please.
Thanks, President Howell. A couple of things not on the report. COVID continues to have a significant impact on staff. We're working through it, utilizing the protocols we have in place through the county health department. And thanks to Haley Dodson, who's leading that effort and keeping us all as safe as possible. We have we're still utilizing COVID protocols, protections, masking as required. The fire department is still responding with masks on, et cetera. And so we are still working through that is the main point. And I want to remind the directors that we were required to implement up to 80 hours of additional sick time to all employees backdated to 1 January. So that required an immense effort by by Pamela Duffield in the finance area, along with Haley Dodson and the fire department, to particularly to go back to look at all those prior cases and re-implement sick days on the books. On our August 11th meeting, I just want to bring everybody's attention. Will be a major meeting for us because we'll be considering the wastewater treatment plant financing. And following that, we will have the PG&E work order, which is the document that outlines all the work to be accomplished going forward once that financing is in place. I also added another section. One area that I talk about often, but you don't really see in black and white is what are we doing for cost savings and what are those savings we're seeing. And so I constantly look at different things. I look for aberrations. I look for oddities in all our billing. I ask questions, and so some of those savings I'm going to start documenting so you can see exactly what they are. In response to some of the questions, so regarding the assistant general manager, that was just a heads up to the board, what I'm working on. There's a significant amount of work that has to go on before we can establish that position. Or I should say reestablish the position for Ms. Dickinson, because that position was in place before in 2002. As far as my duties go, you simply have to click on my bio, and at the bottom you'll see employment agreement. If you click on that, you'll see all the rules that I signed on for with the district, as well as the position description. So everything that I do is in there. I'd say everything I do plus, because there are a lot of things that are in there that aren't necessarily captured and bulletized. But for the assistant general manager, I'm crafting the position description now, taking a look at what we've done in the past, what my requirements are now, and what we might be thinking about for the future. and balancing that with our compensation. I've got to do a compensation study for what assistant general managers are paid for in the state of California at special districts like us, and then make a recommendation to the board. So all of that has to be done before an offer is made to a person. And this becomes a competitive position. So it's offered to all the employees in the district first to learn if there's a qualified candidate, and then we go outside if necessary. So nothing's being done to hide anything. This will be done all in as transparent as possible. And of course, the board has the authority to either approve or disapprove of the position from a financial standpoint. So, and then lastly, I appreciate Michael Thomas's kudos for Carlos. Carlos is probably the one person in the district that is more unseen than most, because he's in the middle of the woods most of the time and moving around different parcels we have to maintain. He does a phenomenal job, and so I appreciate everybody taking the time out of their schedules to recognize him. Thanks so very much. President Howell, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Jim Weigelt. I think before we move to the facilities and resources section of this report, let me just briefly pause to see if any directors wish to comment or have questions at this point. All right, seeing none, let us, yes, Director Farmer.
Thank you, President Howell. I don't want to appear to be the, I don't know quite how to describe this, but I know that, let me ask the general manager perhaps to be a little bit more specific as to why he actually needs an assistant general manager. This particular role was established in 2002. I doubt if anybody in the general audience or on the board now has any recollection of who that was or how long that position was filled. It obviously hasn't been filled for quite a while. It would appear that we certainly already have adequate staff at the board in the administration office to take care of whatever duties need to be done. That's just my particular opinion. And with regard to more effectively balancing administrative duties, it'd be nice to have a further definition of what that exactly means. And so I'd like the general manager to perhaps answer some of these queries that I have right now. If not, perhaps at the next board meeting.
Thank you, Director Farmer. Yeah, that's straying a little bit from the agenda item and getting into a little more than just the manager's report. You asked some very important questions, however, so as we go forward, we'll try to construct a situation where you can get those answered, but this isn't really the proper venue for that. So moving on to the FNR, the Facility and Resources Report. Mr. Mendoza, welcome. You have the floor.
Hi, good afternoon, board. Appreciate the opportunity to provide a report for the Facilities and Resources Department. You have my report as part of the general manager's report, but I did want to provide the board and community with 3 additional items that I'd like to cover verbally. First of all, just wanted to invite the board and the public out to our parks, trails, open spaces, community buildings. It's a great time of the year. We got great weather, long days. So our parks are ready for you to come out. If you want a great time, this Saturday, there's a docent-led walk this Saturday, July 23rd from 10 to 12 on the Fiscalini Ranch Forest. Children are welcome. That space is limited. So if you would like to attend, sign up on FiscaliniRanchPreserve.org. And the theme of the docent walk for this Saturday is the hidden secrets of the Fiscalini Ranch Forest. And it's a great walk led by a great docent guide, Brian Morgan. If you'd like to give back to the ranch, we have a great volunteer opportunity on Tuesday, July 26th. At 9 o'clock, volunteers are going to be meeting on the north end of the Bluff Trail, trimming back vegetation along the Bluff Trail. All hand tools for the work will be on site, and all are welcome. If you would like to attend, we ask you to wear comfortable shoes, long sleeve shirts, and if you have some gloves, you're welcome to bring those along as well. Also wanted to provide the board and the community with some exciting news about the dog park. So as the board knows, our department took over managing the dog park just about as it was moving from the Main Street location to the current Rodeo Grounds location. And that included everything from the day-to-day operations, cleaning, mowing, coordinating the supply of wood chips for the dog park, supplying water, supplying doggy bags, resolving all those conflicts between users, etc. The dog park itself is a very popular destination for the locals. Regularly, we see anywhere between 5 and 10 vehicles out there almost all day long. If you look on Yelp, you'll see that tourists that come out and provide feedback on the park, they leave very high ratings of the park. So it is a loved park. There is a lot of interest on the park. One of the things we were missing is someone to lead and reorganize a board and volunteers for the dog park. And so I'm happy to report that I've been working with a regular user of the park by the name of Shelley Becker. She is excited to help both in organizing volunteers and reconfiguring, redoing a new board for the dog park. So on July 13, we had an initial meeting at the dog park. There wasn't a lot of advertisement for that meeting, but we were happily surprised that through the word of mouth, there was about 15 people that attended the meeting, along with some furry friends as well. All of these folks were excited about volunteering, helping with the day-to-day operations, helping with fundraising, helping to improve the park. There is currently a sign-up sheet on the bulletin board if anybody wants to volunteer. And so far, we already have a list of people that have signed up to volunteer with help at the dog park. Next Wednesday, July 27th at 4:30, we will be having another meeting at the dog park to continue that forward progress. So if you attend the dog park, if you have an interest in parks in Cambria, or you want to help, we invite you to come, both to listen, to provide feedback, or if you want to sign up to help, you're welcome to do that. We also will be having some homemade cookies. So if you want to bring your friend and get a homemade cookie for your friend, you're welcome to do that as well. And lastly, just wanted to let the board know and the public that a couple of days ago, the county released their point in time count report. So that report provides an overview of the homeless issue in the county. And although our department doesn't really provide social services to the homeless residents in Cambria, as you know, we interact with them on a daily basis. As the board knows, we have cleared approximately 150 encampments in the past 3.5 years. So for us, having the knowledge of the issue is important. That report provides an approximate amount of the homeless individuals in the county, their age, their gender, their race, the reasons why they became homeless. I provided the general manager with a copy of that report, and if you board members would like to receive a copy, you can certainly reach out to our general manager and he can provide that to you. If anybody in the public wants to get a copy of that, it's on the county website under the Social Services Department, under Homeless Services, and that's where you will find the point in time count report for 2022. I will leave my report there. If you have any questions on my verbal report or my written report, I'm happy to answer those questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mendoza. Okay, we'll go to the board here for some any questions or observations for yes, Director Gray.
Thank you, President Howell, and thank you, Mr. Mendoza. I had a question on your report. It might be something that General Manager Weigel would have to step in to help answer. It has to do with the list of open space lots that were the 53 listed here, the parcels that were cleared under the weed abatement program. And my main question is, I know we own more lots than that, obviously, and I'm wondering why these 53 were a CCSD responsibility, and who takes care of the others, essentially, in terms of weed abatement, if that has to be done. And the other question, which is actually probably related to it, is how many of these lots that CCSD maintains are in fact under conservation easements and which aren't? And I'm speaking particularly of those 10 lots in that tract near McLeod Way, where the fire broke out during the clearance operation. I know there are like 10 small lots in that tract that the CCSD owns, and they're listed here. They have the 023492 prefix before them. My question is, are these under any sort of conservation easement? And if not, and it's true of the other lots too, and this is maybe getting into a future agenda item, do we have any avenues for disposing of them, selling of them, giving them away, and so forth? Because they might be of value to somebody. My big question is, the first question, essentially, how many of these lots that we're taking care of are under conservation easement, and how's the decision made to take care of these and not the others?
Okay, Mr. Mendoza, I think this is actually more appropriate to bring back. Could we request that maybe at the next your next report that you include that information?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. Actually, the general manager on Tuesday, we had a managers meeting, and he brought up that question, and we'll do some research on those lots and see what the restrictions are on those.
Okay, thank you.
That would be good. That would be good. Thank you.
That's beginning to sound like that might be the start of an agenda item, actually, because you may wish to take some action. So, Vice President Dean, would you help me remember, as we discuss future agendas, we may actually want to have this as an actual agenda item. Mm-hmm. Yes, Ms. Riedel, I see your hand.
Thank you. I apologize. I did have a written comment that I should have raised during the general manager's report comment.
Okay, well, we'll hear it now. Thank you.
I'm sorry about that. So it's from Cheryl McDowell on July 21st. I believe that the CCSD staff will revolt if you put Melissa Bland in the position as general manager assistant to Mr. Weigold. This is not the best interest of CCSD personnel and staff. Cheryl McDowell.
Thank you, Ms. Riedel.
Thank you.
I do see a member of the public. I think I've caused some confusion here, and I really had intended only one public comments for this particular manager's report. But Ms. Dickinson, I'll go ahead and take your comment now.
Okay, thank you, President Howell. I just really want to commend Carlos on an outstanding report. Seldom have I heard such a wonderful report from CCSD staff. I really, and also the work that I see as I walk the trails, Carlos, it's just great. And, a lot of people would say, oh, is this really Tina Dickinson speaking? She's always negative or complaining. No, I see it for what it is. And I want to thank you and your staff. Couple of things I noticed I walk the Huntington Trail almost every day, and or the Bluff Trail or Fire Trail. I wanted to thank you for putting up new signs for dog owners. It's larger, and if they can't see it, I don't understand it. Although when I got on there the other day, I just started out and here was somebody with 3 dogs off leash. And you know, you just kind of say, well, why can't they read the signs? It's really, it is still a problem, but thank you for that. The other thing was I was when I was taking my walk down Moonstone, I needed to use the restrooms. I used the the state parks restroom there at Leffingwell. And there was a large sign on the door and it said, we are in a water crisis. Please consider that when using water. And it was a big sign on the inside of the bathroom door. So I'm assuming each door had one. And I just wonder if we've been addressing that, because I don't usually use the CCSD's public restrooms, but that might be something to think about. And there was one other thing. Now I can't find it. Anyway, again, my thanks. Oh, one more thing on the Huntington Trail. Is there any chance of getting some fresh wood chips down there? They're kind of getting, it's getting really dusty. So maybe some fresh wood chips, that would be really helpful. Thank you, Carlos.
Hey, thank you, Ms. Dickinson. All right, let's take Ms. Bettenhausen, please.
Thank you, President Howell. A procedural question. Will there be another time to comment on the utilities manager's report or not, or should I do it now? I just have one thank you to express.
Yes, actually, there will be time. In fact, I was going, yes, we'll call for comment on the utilities report before the report. So, but we do need the finance manager's report first. But there will be an opportunity for you to comment on the utilities report, or on the utilities report. So okay. Okay, we're ready for the finance manager's report. And today, are we getting, is it going to be Ms. Fritz or is it going to be Ms. Duffield? Who wishes to, yes, Ms. Duffield.
It'll be me this time because this is actually for the month of June.
Okay.
So I won't ask Denise to do that since she wasn't here in the month of June. So good afternoon, President Howell and members of the board. This is the finance manager's report, as I said, for the month of June. So there's only one item that I would like to highlight for you. We've been carrying this note forward for quite some time regarding the FEMA application that we submitted, oh gosh, like a year and a half ago by now. I actually had a representative from FEMA reach out to me just yesterday. They've assigned another new coordinator to our claim, and we're actually getting some emails and traction on where it is sitting and why it hasn't gone through the process. So hopefully in the next finance manager's report, we might be able to say that, you know, we have some additional information and what has been covered in COVID and what won't be covered, and maybe even come up with a dollar value that they're going to reimburse us. So that's something, a step in the good direction. One item that is not on my report that's just happened this last week. I don't know, a couple of finance manager reports ago, I mentioned that there was a new program at the State Department of Housing level for helping people through COVID that are low income and helping them with a one-time payment for their water and wastewater bill up to $2,000. And there's a claim process. CCSD doesn't get involved in deciding if somebody's eligible or not. We just need to make our public aware that that program exists, and it's up to them to reach out and become eligible and qualify for the program. So we did have a payment come through just this week, and our first customer of the district was able to qualify and get relief during that COVID process. So you know, we're going to be getting some more information as we get that from the state to get on our website to help people get in there and get qualified. So I just wanted to talk about it once again, since it is a very new program, and soon we'll have stuff on our website.
Excellent, excellent. So I understand you to say that soon anyone interested can go to the website and it'll be obvious. Obvious.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. There's information on the State Department of Housing website and through CapSlow right now. But you know, they want to send us a toolkit and some information of how they would like it presented on our website. Since it's not our program, it's their program. So we're awaiting that information, and as soon as we get that, we will get we'll get with Ms. Dotson, and we'll have her build a little web page so that we have that information out there.
Excellent. Okay, very good. Do we have any observations, questions from the board regarding the finance manager's report? Seeing none, I'll take, I had intended to take public comment before the report, but this will be public comment for the finance manager's report only. Anybody wish to speak? Okay, Ms. Dickinson, this is only the finance manager that we're talking about here. Okay, go ahead.
Yes, I understand, President Howell. I can read the agenda. Thank you. A couple of items. David Keith Todd Consulting, $13,307.80 for professional services for the WRF permitting from 6/1 through 6/30/22. I see that Mr. Todd, Gus Yates for Todd Engineering created a 16-page memo that was sent to the Coastal Commission with the response that was due on June 20th from the district to the Coastal Commission. Is that what that amount represents for that 16-page memorandum? I would like to know that. Also, a little earlier in the expenditures was Andrew Thompson, and there were quite a number amounting to about 17,000 plus for issues on San Simeon Creek Road. I'm guessing whether it was a theft or some damage done to transmission. And so security items were put in place. And so that was a pretty big expense. And I'm wondering if we could learn a little bit more about that. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Dickinson. That's actually part of the expenditure report. So I'll ask the finance manager to, if she wishes to respond to that during the, when we get to the consent agenda. So I'm still back on the, just the finance manager's report. Remember, this is item 5B. All right, so no further public comment. We'll proceed to the utility manager's report. And for this, I will take public comment first so that Mr. D'Enzo can, should he choose to address any questions, he'll be able to do that. Following his report, though, we will have some, it will come back to the board for questions and additional observations. So it'll be public comment, then the report, and then we'll come back to the board. So I see now we have 3 so far. It'll be Michael Thomas, followed by Elizabeth Bettenhausen, followed by Crosby and Laura Swartz.
Am I audible?
Yes.
As many members of the public have communicated concern about the water levels, I'm alarmed to see the San Simeon Creek well levels shown on page 29 trending at the lowest level over the last decade during April and May, and ever so slightly reassured to see they're no longer at the worst level ever. So just looking at the stage 2 water shortage watch restrictions sheet that we received in the mail, where it says we are limiting irrigation to 3 days per week. I'm still confused, surprised. I can't imagine anyone ever irrigating landscape that often in Cambria. So I generally irrigate our relatively drought tolerant landscaping around every 2 weeks, using our reclaimed water, rainwater, until our tanks run out. And yes, as a member of the R&I committee, I reviewed these definitions prior to publication, but I expressed my opinion then and that they were too lenient. And I just want to express again, my opinion that these restrictions are needlessly lenient. I mean, how on earth do we call irrigating landscaping 3 days per week any limitation? During zero, during stage 0, I can't imagine anyone watering that much in this this dry town.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Let's go then to Elizabeth Bettenhausen, followed by Crosby and Laura Swartz.
Thank you very much, President Howell. I want to thank Mr. Dienzo and the staff involved in creating the long table that begins, or I guess it's called a table, that begins on page 23 of your agenda. I find the list of all of those projects extremely helpful. And I do have a couple of questions about how the table is set up. There are times, and I won't take your time right now, there are times when it's very unclear to me who is the actor for a particular item, where it says simply awaiting a report. So it doesn't really say on whom the item is currently dependent. Sometimes words like panel are used without any specification as to who the agents are. And I find, nonetheless, I find this an extremely helpful list of information for the public, as well as certainly for you directors. And I don't know if there's been any correlation between it and your strategic planning. I don't attend those meetings, but that's up to you to look at to see whether there's consistency between the actual work underway in the district and the planning that you're doing with these little sketches. So I leave that to your judgment. But I want to ask if there are, if I do have questions about who is responsible for taking the next action on a particular item, should I just communicate directly with Mr. Dienzo, or should I ask that question at a board meeting? And I'd like clarity on that so I don't waste anybody's time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Bettenhausen. I think that particular question deserves an answer right now, as it saves me having to write it down. Mr. Dienzo, how do you prefer those communications to occur?
So Dr. Bettenhausen can email me directly if she wants. But to answer just a blank answer for that, you know, all those responsibilities on that table, I and our staff here are responsible for delivering those products. Yeah, I can't put too much detail. It's just it's meant to be a summary table. But yeah, if she wants more specificity, she's welcome.
Okay.
Email.
Thank you, Mr. Dienzo. Yeah, normally I'd wait to the end, but that one was so specific, and I wanted an answer to that myself, and didn't want to have to write it all down. Okay, Crosby and Laura Swartz, followed by Tina Dickinson.
Thank you, President Howell. I was pleased to see the announcement that they were going to begin conducting tours of the water reclamation facility, and also that Mr. Dienzo was going to be having office hours where people could meet with him and ask questions. Whoever was responsible for that, my thanks to you, and I hope members of the community that are interested in these issues will take advantage of these opportunities. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Swartz. Okay, that'll be Tina Dickinson next.
Thank you, President Howell. I don't even quite know where to begin with utility manager's report in many ways, because the main concern, of course, is drought. And I've never seen, I think, throughout the time that I've lived here, and that's been a long time, where we've been allowed in a drought to use water for irrigation as we are currently allowed to. It doesn't make any sense, as Mr. Thomas alluded to, and I alluded to earlier, in the meeting. I think at some point the district's going to find itself in a terrible mess. We, as I mentioned about tourism, the numbers have really grown, especially in July, I've noticed. So at what point is this going to be taken really seriously before we find ourselves in a horrible mess? You know, it's of huge concern. And I'm wondering when the utility manager and staff will be addressing this. I would also like to know, when is SR4 anticipated to be repaired and up and running? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dickerson. Okay, so Mr. Dienzo, we are ready for your report.
All right, with bated breath, everyone's waiting. So, yeah, thank you, President Howell. I'm going to give highlights of my report. It's somewhat of a long report, and I know we have a packed schedule. So I want to give attention to the secondary pumps that we did here at the treatment plant. This is formerly ECM 10, Energy Conservation Measure 10 from the PG&E project. We were able to do this project in-house because it was the necessity of it. Actually, we really needed to do it ahead of the entire project list. So it will be removed from the official IGA list. But kudos to Tony Artho specifically and Tristan Reaper. They did a lot of the work in it, but kudos to our entire wastewater staff. Everyone had a hand in it. It was an all hands type of work. And we were able to also test our backup pumping that we were able to install earlier in view of the upcoming construction that would take place here at the plant. So we were able to get some cross purposes out of that project, but it's a great project, and we were able to do it at a fraction of the cost. But again, it was only because we had the expertise in-house to be able to do that. We can't do that with every project, but we were able to do that here. Also wanted to highlight, we had a really good team effort there on Artist Drive, where we were able to, and you can see on figure 10 there, where both water and wastewater work together. Our collection systems guys needed to do some cleaning of the sewer system there. And also the water staff was able to get some valve exercising work done. So really kudos to the guys for that. Relating to Santa Rosa 4 and Santa Rosa 3, I gave a report about this last week when your board approved the repair of the SR4 project. We should be getting those parts in the next 3 weeks or so, I estimate. That's probably a little generous, but I'm hoping to get it in about 3 weeks. But the good thing is that SR3 is running, as I mentioned last week. It's humming along really well. So it's not too dire of straits for that, unfortunately. Also want to give kudos to Art Garney, one of our water staff here. He was able to pass his grade T3 water treatment operator certification. This is pretty significant because Art, well, number one, we gained expertise here in our department. And Art is one of the operators who is responsible for the WRF, and WRF is a T3 rated plant. So kudos to Art for that, and kudos to our team to get these expertise here in-house. I do wanted to announce, yes, we are going to be conducting water reclamation facility tours again for those who are interested. We hope to do those once a month, typically on a Friday, on a non-board Friday. But as interest is generated, we might be able to schedule it as staff is available. But email me if you are interested. We don't want the groups to be too big, but I don't have a specific number in mind of how many we can do. But But yeah, those are available again, and I'm pleased to announce that. And I am pleased to announce that I will be conducting office hours, if you will. I'm calling these Tech Talks live. Because I have noticed that there are questions that the community has that we aren't really able to answer in detail here at the board or publicly, which you know, we just don't have the time to do that. But I feel like I can definitely shed some more light on that on a one-to-one basis. So contact me, but we do plan to have these times. What did I say? Thought it was every Tuesday from 1 to 2. So please, you know, let me know if you're interested. But I will be conducting those at that time. I'll be able to discuss anything related to water, sewer, WRF. I have other interests like baseball, astronomy, but let's limit it to water, sewer, and WRF. So anyway, that's that. And then also regarding the potable water supply table on page 27 of your board packet, we are currently in a stage 2. We haven't started populating this. We will start populating it next month because we will have the July data by then. And we will evaluate. You know, we are following this very closely. We take the drought situation very seriously here, but we do want to follow the data. And drought is a local issue specifically for us. We have a unique situation here, and you know, but we will be assessing that, and I'll be presenting more specifics on that next month. And if there needs to be a recommendation for a change of stage, we will present that also next month. But anyway, that's a summary of my report, and if I'm available for any further questions.
Thank you, Mr. D'Anzo. Okay, fellow board members, yes, it's up to you now. Yes, Director Gray.
Yeah, thank you, President Howell. Thank you, Mr. D'Anzo, for that good, fine report. I had a question. It might be a little bit like your office hour question. I don't want to go on too much, take too much time with it. But this is an issue that a lot of people present to me, and there seems to be an anxiety out there about one aspect of the WRF that may need to be cleared up or may need to be explained even to me. A lot of people seem to think that if you turn it on, you don't get any positive impact from it. In other words, it doesn't help us out until at least 60 days, which is the travel time, of course, the water from the intake pump to the San Simeon wells. And I understand that there is an effect that it has, which is quite important, pretty much immediately, but that perhaps should be explained a little bit to people, because I do get the sense, even I'm hearing it today in a lot of the comments, that people are afraid, I think, that if we turn on the machine, it won't give us any benefit for 60 days. And I think we need to, you know, if you can help me clear that up in my mind and other people's minds, it'd be great.
Mr. D'Anzo, if that's a relatively short answer, I'd say we do it now. Otherwise, another future agenda item.
Yeah.
So your choice, Mr. D'Anzo.
Yeah, just very simply, it's the mound that gets created from the injection of the product water creates a mound, a groundwater mound, which that's in essence what helps what the WRF does is it provides gradient control that protects the water supply from any kind of seawater intrusion from advancing more closely. So we don't need the actual water from the WRF to be pumped. It's more, we're creating a groundwater mound that will help the groundwater situation immediately. So yeah. I will, you know what, I will be, I have shown that graphic in an earlier Tech Talk topic, but you know, I guess on occasion I need to show that. So
it's a good, it seems to me a good thing to explain on the tours too, because you can actually point to what's going on essentially.
Yes.
When you give the tours. I think I appreciate the answer. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Diaz. Let's try to avoid the back and forth. If you let me recognize you first, that would be a
Okay.
better. Okay, moving right along. Let's see, anybody else have anything for Mr. Diaz right now? Yes, Director Farmer.
Thank you, President Howell. First off, Ray, I want to echo what Ms. Bettenhausen said with regard to the list, your engineering list there. You know, the project description, the status, it's very thorough and complete. And I know, many of us appreciate that. So thank you so much. But I do want to get back to a couple of things. First off, before I forget this one, the secondary pump station that was repaired in-house at much less of the cost if we had hired somebody to do it. I think that is really awesome. It's a certainly, how could we say it? It says something about the very talented staff that we have able to just get in there and do the hard work. But what I'd like to ask you is, there's a history of pump failures and other things happening because of the motor control center not being upgraded. And I seem to recall it was let's say 4 or 5 years ago when the opportunity, and this is not a criticism, just an observation, that the opportunity was offered by PG&E with regard to replacing the transformer that feeds the wastewater plant, replacing that transformer for free. And then as a result, we could upgrade the motor control center from 3-wire to 4-wire. And therefore, all the pumps, the motors and engines could operate more efficiently, could operate not just more efficiently, but work less often. Therefore, the possibility of breakdown would be minimal or limited at least. Can you kind of give some feedback on what I just said? And then I have one more thing to bring up as well. Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Dianzo.
Yes, we will still get the transformer for free. That's still going to happen because it's we're just going to be it's under a category of just improving the existing service. But the other upgrades surrounding it, like the conduits specifically, that needs to be completed, which also does need to be upgraded. We can't use the existing conduits. And yes, we will upgrade the transfer switch, motor control, and a new generator out of it, which is all of those are important.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Dianzo. So, Mr. Farmer, Director Farmer, you had another question.
I want to follow up on this. As I said, this opportunity presented itself 5 years ago. I realize there's a lot going on with regard to the needs of the wastewater plant. But I'm just curious, why is it that this opportunity wasn't taken advantage of 4 or 5 years ago? Why is it still on hold, so to speak, when it could have been, like I said, utilized in the past?
Okay, Mr. Dianzo, if you wish to answer that now, that would be all right, but you could answer that offline if you wish.
Yeah, I kind of don't understand the question, because it's you're asking us why we didn't do it 5 years ago when we could have.
Or since then.
Okay, I think this is probably suitable for a different, an offline discussion. So let us move forward. So Director Farmer, if you could communicate with Mr. Dianzo offline on that, and maybe he can help to give you an answer.
All right, so also one more follow-up, and this is something that I said at the beginning of the meeting. Last year, we declared a stage 4 water emergency at the July 15th board meeting. And at that time, and this year, we've had less rain. The well levels at San Simeon are even lower. And we've had other various complications with regard to water delivery, so to speak. I just wish, I'm just curious as to why we're waiting till August to take a look at the data, so to speak, and then perhaps take action once again. Whereas, like I said, last year, we had already taken action on stage 4 by this time.
All right. Again, that's really not
Yeah.
at this time, Director Farmer, because whatever answer you get, if the board acts and you're asking for, this is not the proper time to do that. So again,
I will endeavor to be more appropriate for the remainder of the meeting. I just want to bring this up. Okay, thank you.
That way, and it's not that the question is inappropriate. It's that it's calling for a greater level of discussion than what's suitable in a report, especially because what you're proposing could lead to board action. So rather than have to go through the thing twice, I think maybe we'll need again to review this and create an agenda item so that you can get some satisfaction on that.
Right.
But it's not appropriate at this moment.
Yeah, it wasn't my intention to make things more difficult than they already are. So
No, I understand that, and I understand your concern, as the community is concerned. We're all concerned, and so I think it is a worthy discussion. But we need it a little better. We need a little more planning for that if we're going to have that discussion, and it needs to be appropriately noticed. Let's move on then. Do we have any other questions or observations for Mr. D'Enzo? Oh, seeing none, we're ready then for the consent agenda. So let me start out by asking if any director wishes to pull any item for discussion and debate. Does anybody want to pull anything? All right, seeing none, does any director wish to simply register a no vote on any item? Okay, seeing none. The only thing is, there was a question that the public asked, and I think I do need to call for public comment on this before we vote. But I think if we could have, Ms. Duffield, could we get an answer to Ms. Dickinson's question? Did you happen to note down what she was asking at that time?
I think those questions really should be answered by the utilities manager because they are utility. I think one was related to the Andrew Thompson charges, and the other was related to a report that Todd Groundwater, I believe, had presented. So I think it would be better if Mr. D'Enzo answers those questions.
Thank you, Ms. Duffield. So Mr. D'Enzo, are you prepared to answer those questions?
Yes, I can answer the questions. The tough automation was, there was some theft of some batteries. Again, they're at the Dead Deer communication site. So as recommended by the deputy sheriff at the time when we filed the police report, the two things that that would prevent theft is one is a surveillance camera and another would be lights. We opted for the surveillance camera, and that was one of the things that we did there. That was part of that work that was done there. And regarding the other question about Todd Groundwater, I'm not certain if that the response to the NOV was used for that particular charge, because Gus Yates did have some modeling that he needs to do for the lagoon discharge extension for our permanent permit that we're going to inform the Section 7 ESA. So so I can't speak definitively.
Okay, thank you, Mr. D'Enzo. Okay, before I call for public comment, I do see Director Farmer, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you, President Howell. Ray, if you don't mind me asking, on the expenditure report or expense approval report on page 50 at the bottom, H2O Innovations USA, there's a payment of just under $9,000 for the water reclamation facility for analytic devices. Could you just elaborate on what those are and why they were needed?
No, Mr. D'Enzo. Oh, you're muted.
I was going to try to see if I could. I was gonna try to see if I could get to that. Okay, so so those analytic devices. So we are wanting to get the WRF ready for possible operation this year. So we are in the process of installing the RO device, the RO filters there. But we also have taken this time to upgrade the pH probes, the human machine interface, which is basically like how we interface with the data and the metrics, and also the chlorine analyzers were also upgraded. So that was all part of that charge for H2O innovations. But yeah, it's all in the effort. You'll see next month too. We'll have more work that will show you how we're getting that WRF in a state of readiness. But that's the reason why.
Thank you, Mr. D'Anzo. Okay, I'm ready to go. Any other questions from the board on any items on the consent agenda? Okay. Okay, quickly I'll go to public comment. This is public comment on any of the items on the consent agenda. All right, I don't see anyone raising their hand, so we will proceed. I'll entertain a motion to adopt items A, B, C, and D from the consent agenda. Director Stidel.
Thank you, President Howell. Yes, I'd like a motion to accept consent agenda items 6A through D inclusive.
Okay, a second to the motion, Director Dean, Vice President Dean.
Yes, I'll second the motion.
Seconded by Vice President Dean. It's been moved and seconded that we adopt the items A, B, C, and D of the consent agenda. So, Ms. Riedel, we're ready for the roll call.
Okay. So Director Stidel.
Aye.
Director Stidel, aye. Vice President Dean.
Aye.
Vice President Dean, aye. Director Farmer.
Aye.
Director Farmer, aye. Director Gray.
Aye.
Director Gray, aye. And President Howell.
Aye.
President Howell, aye.
Motion passes 5-0. So we are now ready for regular business, and we'll deal with 7C first. So this will be a presentation and discussion regarding Mission Country Disposal's solid waste collection and disposal rate increase request and consideration of scheduling a Prop 218 hearing date. So I think we'll go to, if GM Weigold, could you go ahead and start presenting the item?
Yes, President Howell. Agenda item 7C is a presentation and discussion regarding Mission Country Disposal's solid waste collection and disposal rate increase request and consideration of scheduling of Proposition 218 hearing date. Staff recommends that the board discuss and consider the proposed solid waste collection and disposal rate increase and schedule a public hearing on the proposed increase in accordance with the requirements of Prop 218. We have two individuals present to present and answer any questions from the board. First off is Mr. Bill Statler, who we retained to provide an independent review of the rate adjustments being proposed. He'll give a presentation. And then I also want to let the board know that we have Jeff Claren here, who represents Mission Country Disposal, to answer any questions that may come up during the discussions.
Thank you, Jim Weigold. So with that, let us start with Mr. Statler. So welcome, Mr. Statler. You're still muted. Mr. Statler, we're not able to hear you.
There we go.
Well, maybe you can hear me now.
That works.
Okay. So, I'm reminded as I try this presentation, I think it was H.L. Mencken, sort of a pundit back in the 30s, who said for every complex problem, there's a simple solution, and it's usually wrong. I'm going to try and do my very best job of presenting what has actually turned out to be a relatively complicated, complex rate analysis, and hopefully do that A, in a brief period of time, and B, in a way that's understandable. And you know, on this one, Leah is going to be my pilot, so I'm going to ask her to bring up my presentation.
Okay.
Okay, there we go. This is just the intro page. So Leah, if you would take a click. There we you know, is that just me that has the gallery? Okay, that's good. So report purpose in a nutshell is to analyze the rate request for mission country disposal, which I'll refer to as MCD in the rest of the presentation, really for two agencies, Cambria Community Services District and the Cayucas Sanitary District. So why look at both of those at the same time? Because you receive exactly the same level of service, which is refuse collection, recycling collection, and green waste collection. You have not exactly the same franchise agreements. They're almost exactly the same, but there is one key difference. In Cambria, your franchise fee rate is 6%, and in Cayucas, it's 10%. And so that does affect the rate analysis, and you end up with slightly lower increase because of that franchise fee. But in your franchise agreements, you've both adopted the City of San Luis Obispo's rate setting manual as your reference. So the rate review methodologies are the same. And of course, the financial information is closely related for each agency because we don't have separate financial information, which is reasonable and appropriate. We don't have separate financial information for Cayucas versus Cambria versus Harmony. It's really mission country disposal provides services to all of those groups. So we look at them as a whole and we account for you uniquely where you're unique, like the franchise fee, but it's the same base of operations where you're similar. Next slide, please, Leah. So we'll just cut to the chase here in terms of what does the analysis show. Initially, back in October, when MCD presented the rate analysis, they were looking for something like a 44% rate increase. Now, after taking a look at the application, getting better information, it's going to be, I do recommend a 41% rate increase, which is what they've asked for. So the next question would be, what's the difference? And that's the next slide. Really, two things changed. And I'll be talking about this later, but in the cost analysis that we do, we really organize costs into two groups. There are those costs where they are allowed to earn a reasonable profit. And those are things like direct labor, depreciation, gas and oil, insurance. And then there are costs that are called pass-through costs. And those are largely disposal costs. And that's the cost for the landfill. That's the cost for the materials recovery facility for recyclables. That's the cost of the green waste processing. But there's others, they get to recover those costs, but they don't get to earn a profit on them. And so there was some discussion about whether the green waste processing costs, which are not provided directly by MCD, they are contracted for with a private company, whether those should be subject to and allowed a profit, or whether those should be more clearly thought of as being a pass-through cost, since it's just another disposal cost, which in the past have been passed through. Ultimately, for MCD as well as the other operations throughout the county, they're being treated as pass-through costs. And that does make a fairly significant difference because the green waste processing costs, largely driven by state legislation regarding food and green waste, it's the most significant cost increase that MCD is facing. And so they'll get to recover that cost, but they won't get to earn a profit on it. And the other issue at the time, certainly back in October, there was some discussion with the Integrated Waste Management Authority, which kind of regulates solid waste throughout the county, except not everyone in the county. The county has pulled themselves out of that. And so there was some discussion giving increased regulatory requirements because of state legislation, possible county exclusion. MCD made some assumptions, which were maybe reasonable at the time. They made some assumptions about what that cost increase would be. And for whatever it's worth, the Integrated Waste Management Authority went a different direction from what the assumption would be. So basically, those waste management fees have been excluded from the fee analysis altogether, because that fee arrangement, which turned out to be 5.4% of revenues, those are not imposed by, those are not set by the Cambria Community Services District. Those are determined by the Integrated Waste Management Authority. They will be a separate line item on the bill, in fact, have been for several months now, but they're really not part of the cost analysis for you at all. So removing that from the fee analysis altogether, reclassifying the green waste cost, that's basically why there's a difference between what was submitted in October and what was ultimately submitted in late March. Next slide. So this is what the fees look like. Right now for a 32-gallon container, it's $26 a month. With this proposed increase, it'll go up by about $10 a month. Really important as you look at some of these really high fees for 64 gallons and 96-gallon containers. I think literally only a handful of customers have selected the 96-gallon containers. And in that case, 96 gallons is a lot. These are people that are asking for an awful lot of trash to be taken away. 85% of all of your customers, of all your residential customers, have 32-gallon service. So as you look at the impact on your customers, really 32 gallons is where you want to focus on. And that has the smallest increase, obviously, of the services that are here. You may also notice that in this case, it's proportional. 64 gallons, which is twice the size container, is twice as expensive as 32 gallons. And 96 gallons is 3 times as expensive as 32 gallons. But again, the vast, vast majority, 85% of your customers are 32-gallon service. Next slide, please. So there are 2 key drivers on the 41% rate increase. And this is where the analysis gets a little more complicated than has been the case in the past. There are really 2 key drivers. One is just how much more does it cost them to provide service. But the second one is, and they need to achieve a reasonable profit margin. As I've mentioned, the rate manual says on those, quote, allowable costs, the ones that aren't pass-throughs, that 8% is a reasonable profit margin on that. If they fall significantly behind on that, they can't have recovery for any past losses. But one of the purposes of this base review, if they were either under-earning or over-earning, this base review would be an opportunity to reset that baseline, if you will. And in this case, and I'll show this in the next slide, because they've lost so much money with the current rate structure that's in place now in the past 2 years, they don't get to recover those losses, but they shouldn't have to sustain them going into the future. And this is the opportunity to reset that. So we really have 2 factors that are affecting this rate increase. Next slide, please. And so let's first talk about the direct cost drivers. And there's really, when you look at all of their costs, and they have a detailed accounting for all of their costs on a detailed line item by line item basis, there's really 5 costs that account for over 90%, almost 95% of the rate increase is described by these 5 factors. Increase in depreciation, which is driven by replacement of trucks. The green waste processing, I said this is one of the most significant cost increases that's happening, basically in responding to state legislation regarding food and green waste processing. Direct labor, the staff that go out and collect the refuse, the recycling, and the green waste. Insurance costs, both liability and group insurance, and gas and oil, which if anybody's driven their car at any time in the recent last months would recognize that that's likely to be a cost driver. But when you look at those, of the total 1.5 million increase, those 5 account for the vast majority. But in fact, everything else is only 2% of the rate increase. Next slide, please.
2% of the rate increase. Got it.
So we have those costs which are driving, would otherwise drive the rate increase by about 25%. But as I mentioned, on top of that, we have what's the allowable operating profit cost ratio. They're allowed 8% on their costs, except for those pass-through. It was a negative almost 9% in 2020 and a negative 24% in 2021. Next, click on the slide, please. They don't get to recover those past losses. None of this rate increase is to get what they lost in 2020 or 2021, but we do need to reset the baseline so that they can earn an 8% profit going into the future. And of the rate increase, of that 41% rate increase, about 60% of it is due to cost drivers, that 25% in cost, but about 15% of that rate increase is to just get them back to profitability. That's a reasonable profit on their non-pass-through costs. Next slide, please. So what that looks like is this, as we total up towards 41.4%, the cost drivers is 25%. Catching up on that, on their losses in 2021, and I should point out in this analysis, I focused on 2020 versus 2022 because we have audited, actual independently audited data for 2020 at the time the application was submitted. So rather than using estimates, I wanted to account for the audited financial numbers. It's a 2-year number, so for the most part, if something went up by 10%, okay, that's about 5% a year. So you have that deficit from the past. They don't get to recover it, but we need to set that going forward. And then, of course, once we get them to break even, they're allowed that operating 8% cost margin. You put those factors together, and that's the 41% rate increase to which they are allowed based on the adopted rate setting methodology. So about 60% of the rate increase is for cost increases, 40% is to just get back to a reasonable profit margin from the losses they sustained in 2020 and 2021. Next slide, please. So here are the sort of the key findings. We do have a complete application that meets the requirements of the rate manual. Again, initially submitted in October, but for those 2 reasons I pointed out, what was the IWMA going to do about fees, how to best treat processing costs, we did get a revised application in March. You really receive a very comprehensive level of service. You get curbside trash, recycling, and green waste at reasonable rates. I'm not going to say they're low rates, but they are reasonable when we look at your situation in terms of services, and we compare that with similar communities. And you have to realize it's really not the best way to look at it, but rates are based on the refuse container. And they're really based on whether you're 32, 64, or 96. If you want to look at it this way, that's what you're paying for refuse. But you're getting your recycling and your green waste picked up every month conceptually for free. Because we're not charging you based on the size of your refuse container. We're not based on the size of your blue tank container or on the size of your green waste container, nor how much material you have in them. So conceptually, when you think of this fee, it isn't just the 32 gallons of trash that you collected for this fee. It's all the recycling material and the green waste that gets collected. And most importantly, it's how that's disposed of in an environmentally responsible way. So you receive a comprehensive level of service. This rate manual has been in place since 1994. It's almost 30 years old. I think it has served the city of San Luis Obispo and all of the other agencies in the county that have adopted it really, really well. But you would be shocked to hear things are different 30 years later than they were in 1994. And this manual really needs to be revised and take into account the challenges of 2022 and not what the challenges were back in 1994. And this manual update is in process And there are some staff that are working on that, but that definitely needs to happen. The fourth bullet is what we're calling the temporary delayed rate increase. I do want to point out the rate manual has always provided for retroactivity. And keep in mind, you will probably adopt rates, my guess is sometime in October or late, sometime in October, maybe late September. The rate increase will probably become October. From the trash company's perspective, they asked for this rate increase a year ago. And as I'll talk about in a minute, this is the first time that a request for retroactivity has been considered. So this is another one of those complex issues. I wish I had a simple answer, but I don't. Next slide. So what's the basis for this in the background? In the rate manual, and this would normally be an appropriate time frame, it says it should take you 120 days from the date the application is submitted to when the rate can be effective. And if for whatever reason, for reasons that are beyond the control of the trash company, it goes beyond the 120 days, the manual does provide for retroactivity in that case. And so on its surface, but for all the other things that actually have happened over the last 6 months, this would imply a March 1st effective date for the retroactivity. But this review has been anything but normal. So next click, please. So there are sort of 4 key factors for why this has been delayed. The first is Proposition 218 notice requirements. This manual was prepared in 1994. Proposition 218 was adopted in 1996. And in fact, no one even thought that 218 applied to private company rates until 2006 with an appellate court decision at that time. So the noticing requirements you're going through were nowhere on anybody's radar in 1994. So the manual in that 120 days doesn't account for the fact that you have 218 notice requirements. And those alone, even though the notice requirements are 45 days, the fact is you have to prepare an agenda report. Many agencies like yourself want to review the rate increase and want to review the notice before it goes out. So as a practical matter, from a staff work perspective, you're talking about anywhere from 70 to 90 days more in what it takes to do this. Of course, the IDMA rates are a factor. Those were finally adopted in March. So we needed to work through what's going to happen, and we really didn't want to do a rate analysis that would get notified with the possibility that that might be inappropriate. Again, that was adopted. It's a 5.4% fee against the bill, and that'll be effective July 1st. MCD, I want to point this out. MCD has never dragged their feet on this process. When I've asked questions, they've been extraordinarily responsive. The problem is this was a very complex review, which surfaced a lot of questions. And almost inevitably, those answers to those questions simply surfaced another question. And they basically say a standard rule of thumb, this kind of got developed by the Japanese in their lives. You really need to ask why to the 5th level if you're actually going to find out the real reason for something. So if you ask, well, why is this up? You'll get an answer that says, this is why. Well, why is that the case? Well, that gets you another one. Once you've asked why to the 5th level, now you probably begin to surface the real reasons about what's going on. My only point is they were always responsive in the questions that were asked, always responded in a timely way. This was an especially complex review that, again, really just wasn't envisioned in that 120-day cycle. There were some current rate concerns that surfaced, but those have all been satisfactorily resolved. And so it's not an issue now, but it took a little due diligence to get to that. basically, once we got the revised application, what they've submitted, I concur, are reasonable costs. They've reasonably met the criteria, but I have to be frank, getting to that conclusion did not happen over a weekend. So those are the delay factors. Next slide, please. So my recommended retro date is July 1st. And quite frankly, there are some factors that could make it go beyond July 1st. If I was the trash company's representative, I would be arguing for March 1st because I think I met my due diligence obligations at that point. And so this is, if you will, taking into account the 120 days, taking into account it's going to be almost a year before they start to see these increased revenues. I think July 1st is a reasonable start date for when the retro begins. Next slide.
June, 4 months.
We're going backwards. Oh, no, we're not. We're good. So there's really three factors when we weigh in, well, how much does this retro, how much does this temporary delayed rate cost? Well, when does the retro period start? Is it March 1st? Or is it July 1st? And then what becomes the likely effective date? And in this case, most likely is probably October 1st. And then when does it end? Because you have the question of how long is the retro period for, and then how long a period of time do we get to amortize it over? And I have to be honest, every other agency that's looked at this, all of the agencies in the South County, San Luis Obispo Garbage, they've all been confronted with this temporary delayed rate increase issue because they all had the same concerns about green waste and the Waste Management Authority fees. So all of the other agencies, they've picked December 31st as the end date. Makes a lot of sense. Let's get this over with. It's a little like, if you have to take the Band-Aid off, do you do it really slow or do you do it really fast? I don't know the answer to that. That's probably a medically valid one, but it's probably as much a question of preference. So you have these three variables. And I'll talk about some different options in terms of the amortization period, if you will. But so far, everyone that has, every governing body that's been faced with this has wanted to get it over with by December 31st. That way we start January 1st on a clean basis that doesn't have a rate that has this retro component. It just has the core rate for going forward. Next click, please. So if these were the three factors, that's 3 months of retroactivity allocated over a 3-month period. And that means that there would be a temporary added rate increase of 41%. And that would end December 31st, 2022. Next slide. So yeah, if you do the math, for a temporary period of time, if this was the assumptions, through December 31st, it would be an 82% rate increase. But keep in mind, it would go back to the 41% rates January 1. Stated simply, it's high because we have 3 months of retroactivity, but only 3 months to allocate it over. Well, that raises the surface. Where's the magic to December 31st? Next slide. This could be extended by 3 months. Now, I know MCD is receptive to this, or I wouldn't be suggesting it as an alternative. But if, for example, we extended it by 3 months, simply extended it to March 31st, then you're only talking about a temporary added rate increase of 20%. Keep in mind, the amount of money to be recovered for their losses for 3 months is exactly the same under either of these analyses. It's just, does it get spread over 3 months? Does it get spread over 6 months? And that's what lessens the impact of that. In fact, if you look at it, it's just about half, which is what you would expect mathematically since it's 6 months versus 3. And then you would have a temporary combined delayed rate increase of 62%. It wouldn't go away in December, though. This added fee wouldn't go away until April 1st. Next slide. So what I'm going to focus on now, those are the core sort of key findings, recommendations. How did we get to that 41% rate recommendation? And the first one is to understand the rate review cycle. There's base year reviews and interim year reviews. In the base year, it requires a comprehensive detailed analysis of revenues, expenses, and operating data. The last base review was completed in 2019. I did the last base year review in 2019. This is a base year review. The 2 and 3 year cycles, in the 2 and second and third years, MCD is eligible for an interim year rate request. That's a simpler process. It takes a look at the consumer price index. It takes a look at what happened to pass-through costs, and it makes an adjustment for franchise fees. So the second and third years are simpler, more administrative in focus. And then in the next year cycle, like this one, if there's anything off here, if they earn too much money, if they earn too little money, the base year is an opportunity to reset that going forward for the future. Next slide. This year for the proposed year, as they proposed and was approved in 2019, they're just recommending a more straightforward process for a CPI increase in 2020 through and 2023. I've done analysis on this in the past, and it makes very, very, very little difference. And in some cases, it might give them a rate increase that's greater than CPI. And so to the degree that there's a simpler process that gets you to the same place, that's what they've asked for. It's what was approved in 2019, and I concur with that. It's probably, once we get an updated rate manual, I can't, say with 100% certainty what's going to be in it, but I think this suggested change, simpler approach will probably be in the new rate manual. Next slide. So really the base year review kind of surfaces two key questions. Should they be granted a rate increase? And if so, how much? And that's really driven by how much does it cost to provide the services? Are these costs reasonable? And if so, what's a reasonable level of return on those costs? Next slide. So I looked at costs from sort of three perspectives. For those of you that remember Judy Collins, she looked at clouds from two sides. I looked at this cost from three. So the first one is to just take a look at the detailed costs and changes by key cost component from 2020 to 2022. Again, why 2020? Because those are audited, independently audited financial statements. Then compare those with what happened in the CPI over that period of time, and then take a look at rates in comparable communities. Next slide. So here's, in the report you have, based on who were the most significant cost increases, I did kind of a deep dive on 9 key factors. On the allowable cost side, this is what they're allowed to earn an 8% profit on. I looked at direct labor, I looked at their office salaries, I looked at depreciation, gas and oil, and insurance. On the pass-through costs, there's 3 of those. Disposal at the landfill, disposal at the materials recycling facility for recyclables, and what's happening with green waste, and then took a look at franchise fees. But the 5 that are highlighted here in red, those are the key drivers. Next click, please. And just as a reminder, those top 5, they're 94% of what's driving the cost increase. So I want to spend a little time, because it's complicated, on these 5 key cost factors. Next slide. First, let's deal with sort of cost accounting issues. How are costs for the various companies accounted for at the Central Coast regional level? Keeping in mind, we have a number of different companies that Waste Connections manages for the Central Coast. There's, of course, Mission Country Disposal, but it also includes San Luis Garbage, which services the city of San Luis Obispo and adjacent areas like Cal Poly. South County Sanitary Service, which is really the entire South County. It's Arroyo Grande, it's Grover Beach, it's Pismo Beach, it's Napomo, it's Avila Beach. Morro Bay Garbage Service, which is largely the city of Morro Bay, but surrounding unincorporated areas. Coastal Roll-Off Service, this is kind of, if you have a big construction project, you may have noticed there's a big dumpster in front of it that's just for that. Well, that's Coastal Roll-Off. They operate the Cold Canyon landfill. And in addition, they operate the Cold Canyon processing facility. That's the materials recovery facility. That's where they process the recyclable materials. Keeping in mind their green waste operation is under contract with a separate company called HZI. So you have those companies that we get audited, so that each one has individual audited financial statements, but they're really operated jointly by Waste Connections. Next click, please. Next, okay. Again, I mentioned audited financial statements for each company, and even within MCD, you have Cambria Community Services District, you have Cayuga Sanitary District, you have Los Osos CSD, and all of the other North Coastal unincorporated areas like Harmony, like San Simeon. So you have cost accounting issues. How do we apply the right cost to the right service area? Next slide. So here's how costs are direct and allocated. For direct costs, they do directly account for the labor hours that are required basically for collection. They do account for the direct labor hours separately for each company and each service area. Liability insurance is assigned to them for each of their companies by the liability insurance company. They have their own underwriting criteria, and they actually assign it to each individual company. And of course, franchise fees and franchise costs are directly accounted for each company and for each service area. And revenues are accounted for by each service area and by each company. Those are the direct costs for which we can, directly look and go, well, how much did labor collection cost for MCD? And then even within MCD, how much did it cost for Cambria versus Cayucas, for example? All other costs, however, next click, those are allocated in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. And so how do those costs get allocated? Next slide is just a brief overview of the basis of allocation that they used in 2022. They used customer accounts for office salaries, which makes sense. The office salaries, that's mostly customer service. Well, if people have questions on their bill, that's not driven by how big their bill is necessarily. That's driven by how many customers we have to service. So that's based on customer accounts, legal and accounting. Direct labor hours, it drives depreciation, which makes sense. If I'm allocating more labor hours to a certain area to collect items, they have a truck. In fact, they have 3 different trucks, right? Well, that's probably related to how many hours are involved in collection. So that's a reasonable basis of allocation. Using tonnage, which probably is sort of related to other values, we're using tonnage for landfill, for the MRF, and for green waste. How much tonnage is collected in these 3 areas for each of the service areas? We're using revenue to allocate corporate overhead and bad debt and other taxes. We're using container counts to allocate container depreciation, which makes sense. And then lastly, fuel is being allocated based on how much gallons of fuel is being used by each of these areas. In my opinion, all of these are reasonable bases of allocation, but quite frankly, they're subject to change depending on who is the team working at Waste Connections in preparing the application. You don't want these to change significantly from year to year, because then you can skew costs based on it. Before you had 20% of labor hours, but now you have 15, you're probably going to see a cost decrease. But it isn't because labor costs change, it's because your allocation changed. Or it can go the other way. You used to be 15%, but now you're 20. Or we used to allocate it based on labor, but now we're going to allocate it based on containers. Now you don't have any relationship between how you allocated it before. This is something the new rate manual, quite frankly, needs to address. It needs to be clear that these are the reasonable bases of allocation that we agree with, so that we get consistency from year to year. Now, I happen to agree that I think these are reasonable. And so, the good news going forward is this is probably a reasonable basis for the future. But it has changed over time, and it has resulted in cost changes. And so it's really important, I think, that we reach some consensus on this. And if for some reason Waste Connections believes that a change makes sense, they can't just do it. They need to make a proposal that needs to be agreed upon. Okay, it makes sense to do it on this versus that, but give us a heads up. What kind of change is that likely to make, you know, on an organization-wide basis? But this is an example, making sure that I understood all of these allocations and that all of these allocations made sense, which means I have to look at more than just MCD. Because in order to understand the 15% to MCD, I got to understand the 25% to San Luis garbage. So another one of those kind of complex factors, if you will. Next slide. So when we look at direct labor, the labor costs themselves increase by about 5% annually. I think that's reasonable given the need to retain good employees and attract good employees. So I think a 5% annual cost increase for labor is reasonable. However, when we look at their allocation of direct costs between companies, and as I investigated the basis for that, of the total Waste Connections allocation, you ended up with an 11% increase in direct labor costs because of how they were apportioned. Now, if you think about this, you are the furthest reach for collection in the entire Waste Connections system. So the idea that your labor costs of driving the 3 different vehicles from San Luis Obispo near the airport to Cambria, it makes sense that you're more expensive than Cayucas, that you're more expensive than Morro Bay, that you're more expensive than Los Osos, and you're certainly more expensive than San Luis Obispo. So that's a factor, and it obviously complicated this rate analysis because I couldn't understand a 20% rate increase until I understood labor is 10%, but another 11 is because of the allocation basis. And of course, because labor, direct labor, is an allocation driver, that also drives allocations for other key costs, most notably vehicle operating costs and group health insurance. Next slide. So what's happening with depreciation, which is really an amortized cost of their acquisition of the vehicles that are required to drive. It's also the containers, but containers are a much smaller part. There's a lot more containers than there are trucks, of course, but containers don't cost the almost $500,000 a vehicle that a truck costs. So back in 2019, I noticed and I surfaced the idea that this cost was going to continue to increase because there were a lot of older vehicles in the inventory that, one, were going to reach their useful life by the time we did the next rate increase. More importantly, there were vehicles that had fully been depreciated. So you had 2 factors happening there. Where the vehicles were totally depreciated and being replaced, that's going to be a $5,000, $60,000 increase per vehicle. And even if they weren't fully depreciated, when they did get fully depreciated, we were going to pay a lot more for those trucks in 2022 than we paid for them 7 years ago. So those are the 2 factors. So that's one of the big things that's driving this big increase in depreciation. You have a lot of old trucks that were cleaned out of the inventory, replaced with new modern vehicles, and they're just a lot more expensive than they used to be. I think this is going to stabilize because I think 2 things are going to happen. They've done a good job of trying to stay current on their vehicles. So they don't have this whole inventory of very old vehicles using more gas and oil and diesel fuel compared with keeping their fleets active. The other thing is, back 30 years ago, when this manual was put together, 7 years was a reasonable depreciation cycle. But quite frankly, as you may have recalled from vehicles you purchased 30 years ago versus purchased your vehicle today, they just have longer useful lives. They're better made, they're going to last longer. So I'm pretty sure when this rate manual gets updated, I can't make any assurances, but when this gets updated, this will get moved to 10 years. Well, that's going to make a big difference between allocating a $400,000 vehicle over 7 years versus over 10, because it means instead of 60,000 each, you're going to be more like 40,000 each. And I think that's what will happen with the next cycle. So, so I think this is going to stabilize. You're not going to see this huge jump in future years. Could go up because, again, vehicle replacements could be more expensive 3 years from now. If you've purchased a new car lately, you know there's been big price increases on new cars. So I can't make any guarantees on that. But I do believe whatever the cost of replacement vehicles, they'll be allocated over 10 years instead of 7. Next slide. Gas and oil. I don't know if I have to spend a lot of time on this, but this is projected to increase about 9% annually. I think that's more than a reasonable analysis, given the volatility you can see in fuel costs, both up and down. I mean, you've already witnessed that. You saw huge increases to plus $6 over the last month. And in most areas of even the county, which has some of the highest gas costs in the state, most of them are into the 5s now. So they say that about a 50-cent decrease in gas prices from when they reach their peak. So this is volatile up and down, but this is the basis. It seems reasonable to me, given how difficult this is to forecast. And of course, the allocation based on gallons used went up as well. And that results in an increased allocation base to you of 23%. Again, it seems reasonable that you use as a service community more gas, more fuel than anybody else in the MCD, Waste Connections versus MCD in their allocation base. So again, this is one of those issues where this just required a lot of deep dives by both MCD and me to make sure that we had a solid basis for these rate increases. And I should point out on some of these issues, because they're asking for a 41% rate increase, it makes sense to spend extra due diligence, extra caution in making sure that those costs are reasonable and fully supported. Next slide, please. Insurance. This is really not largely a controllable cost by them. It doesn't mean that they can't have safety programs, and it doesn't mean they can't be doing things that lower their risk management profile. But they get the insurance quote they get for health insurance and that they get for liability. And so we're looking at about 7% increase for health, 22% for liability insurance. And again, I think it's a reasonable assumption. And here's the interesting thing about liability insurance. Your risk management portfolio, your loss history certainly plays a role in your premiums. But how well the insurance companies did in investing your insurance premium plays a far more outsized role in what happens with your insurance premium. So this is one of those areas where, yes, Waste Connections can influence, can do some things to affect this, but they don't control what the insurance company's rate of return is on their investments, which 2 years ago was probably really good. And right now, this minute with the stock market is probably really bad. So I think these are reasonable assumptions given that. But then again, we allocated labor costs differently. And so that's going to provide a higher share of those higher group of health insurance costs. Next slide. And then the last one is food and green waste, which is next to depreciation. It's the largest driver. It's the largest area of cost increase for MCD as a whole, not necessarily for you. It's second most, but not by much. Again, I mentioned before, Waste Connections, MCD contracts with HCI, which is in the business of green waste processing. And the fees that they're being charged reflect the cost to build that green waste digester via depreciation, what it costs to operate it, and then what it costs to maintain that digester plant. That's had to be stepped up in order to meet green food and green waste requirements in meeting California's SB 1383. 1383 itself is not necessarily new, but the requirement to actually implement it, that's new. That was effective January 1st. And really every refuse company in the entire state is scrambling to meet these requirements. And long story short, there were initial cost projections of what this would be. It's just been a much more complicated operation than they anticipated in what it takes to really do this. And I have a detailed analysis in my report that, in the interest of, if you want to watch TV later tonight, I'm just going to refer you to look at that detailed cost analysis. But this is another area where we dug deep to make sure that this increase in contracted costs made sense. The best we were able to do with this contracted cost, at least it doesn't earn an 8% profit by MCD. They get to recover the cost, but they don't earn a profit on it. Next slide. So when we look at the cost, what's happened with cost of living over this period, over the 2-year cycle, the CPI increased by about 8.5% over the last 2 years, about 4% annually. If we exclude those 5 detailed factors, which have their own basis for why they've increased more than CPI, those costs only increased by about 3%, or about 1.5% annually. So, but for these 5 costs, which admittedly is a big but for those 5 costs, they've been under CPI in all of their other costs. Next slide. When we compare your trash rates to other companies, and again, I would encourage us to focus on the 32-gallon container column. Yes, you are among the highest that I surveyed, but not necessarily by a lot, keeping in mind this is the proposed fee, not the fee you're at now. You know, you're in the ballpark with Paso Robles, you're in the ballpark with Templeton, but you have to keep in mind when you look at the cost of service, you are the furthest distant community for MCD to service. So it makes sense that your costs would be, your fees would be higher. And that's what I'm saying. You don't have low costs, but I think given the level of service you receive and given your distance from the support, you have a fair cost.
Excuse me, Mr. Statler, this looks like, can we make a brief break at this point in the presentation and give folks a chance to take a...
I'll tell you what, I think I have like 2 slides left.
Okay, let's do that.
And 2 of those say question, and 1 of those says questions. So if we could just go to the next slide.
Good.
So what's a reasonable return on this cost? Again, I mentioned this. We have the allowable cost, which is an 8% profit, pass-through cost, and then there's costs that are just simply excluded. They don't get to earn a profit on them. They don't even get to recover them. They're simply excluded under the rate manual. Next slide. So here's how that analysis basically works. This is the basic rate model. We look at what their allowable costs are. That's about 5.1 million. They get an 8% operating ratio in that. So they get on that 5.1 million, they get to earn about 400,000. Then we look at their pass-through costs. The most significant of these, landfill, the materials recovering facility, green waste, franchise fees. They have to collect those and pass them on to you. They don't get to earn a profit on it. And then there's some other ones. So when we look at the total pass-through costs, they're about 2.4 million. So when you look at their total cost, about 70% are eligible to earn a profit and about 30% are pass-through. So when we look at that, they are allowed about 7.9 million is what they get in meeting these requirements. But they're only getting 5.8 million a year. This is one of the reasons why they lost so much money in 2020 and even more in 2021. They're only getting 5.8 million, 5.7 million from the rate base. So when we look at that, that would mean about a 40% increase in costs. We have to make an adjustment for franchise fees because if the revenues are higher, the franchise fees are going to be higher. They don't retain that, of course, but they have to adjust for that. And that's exactly how you get to the 41.4% cost. You have to be comfortable that you've done your due diligence on each of these components, but this is how the basic model comes up with a 41% rate increase. Next slide. Because this is the conclusion. I believe the costs are reasonable, and I believe the rate increase meets the reasonable cost criteria. Everyone's favorite last slide is next. So I'll be happy to answer any questions you have. And this would be, if you want to take a break, this would obviously be a good point to do it.
Yeah, let's do the break because this deserves all of our attention without any distraction. So, folks, is 5 minutes long enough? Yeah, Director Gray?
Oh, no, I say 5 minutes. Yeah, it's my little.
Yeah, 5 minutes. My clock says 3:40 now, so come back at 3:40.
3:45. Yep.
Okay. Okay, we stand in recess for 5 minutes. See you all in a little while. Okay, I think all the directors are back. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we are ready to resume. That's call the meeting back to order. Before we commence, as I'm looking at the clock and thinking about what we have to deal with, I think realistically, if it really is this group's desire to finish before 5, we will probably need to table the other 2 items until the next meeting. Yes, Jim Weggold.
I have a recommendation on the strategic plan for the board, and that is to accept the plan as written and then utilize ongoing reviews over the next several months to change anything you want to change.
Okay, is there, okay, when we come, as long as I see everybody seems, so we may be able to get to that one. The other one, though, I'm not sure about. What I suggest now is that we go ahead and go ahead. Yes, Jim Weigel.
Yes, I've in talking with the directors through my boardwalk calls, there are 2 designated directors that are interested. So I think the Veterans Hall topic will also go very quickly.
Okay, let me suggest the following, that we go ahead and extend till 4:45. And then any unfinished business, well, we got to get this one done. We've got to get that noticing thing out. But anything other than that, if we need to table or anything, then we can, or as Jim Weigel suggests, we can make short work of the other 2 items. However, we wouldn't have time to discuss future agenda items if we do that. So, but I just want to get some, Director Seidel, or you're saying it doesn't matter?
Doesn't matter now.
I was just saying there's plenty of opportunity to be able to provide that information to you and to Vice President Dean for your agenda review meeting. So I think that the business at hand that we're talking with right now is paramount, that we have to address. And there's several segments to it that we need to be very specific about. The other 2 items may be able to be resolved very quickly, and if we can do it, we'll do it. But at least go to 4:45.
Okay, let's do that. So I'm going to, I'll entertain a quick motion to go till 4:45.
So move. Okay,
moved by Director Gray, seconded by Director Steidel. Moved and seconded to go to 4:45. I'm asking for a unanimous consent. Do we have any objection? We do have an objection. Don't raise your hand if you don't. Okay, so without objection, we will go until 4:45. So now we're ready to resume, and I think so, Mr. Stadler, it's back to you, and I think you're asking questions.
I do just have one comment I'd like to make that I think the district council will concur with. Just remember, the focus of this meeting is not to approve these rates. It's really to have received a briefing on them. But it's really about just starting the process and getting the notice out. I don't know if that makes the remaining discussion any faster, but it's really not to have a public hearing and get public comment on their concerns about the rate. And it's really not the time for you to necessarily weigh in on whether you think this makes sense or doesn't make sense. Certainly, if there's questions you have about the analysis, this is absolutely the appropriate time to pursue that. But just to keep in mind that the focus of this discussion is not a public hearing on the rates, and it's not certainly for you to make decisions about the rates, but it is a good time to ask questions. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions. If you don't have any, I'll be happy to go get another glass of water.
Okay, well, let's start with questions from the board, and then I think it would be appropriate to go to the public. So let's start with the board, Director Gray, followed by Director Steidel, followed by Vice President Dean.
Well, thank you, President Howell. Yeah, I'll start out with one question. I had a few, but this one may be a good one for discussion offhand, from the start. Your analysis, or Mr. Statler's analysis, assumes a reasonable operating profit of 8%. What's the basis for that? Is that something that has been our, standard margin for the past, or is there some other analysis for that might call into question? Maybe the 6% is more reasonable at 10%. That's my lead question. So let's start with that.
We'll start with that, and we'll come back to the others.
If I can Mr. President, is it okay if I respond?
Please do, but wait for me now. Yeah. To keep control.
That really goes back 30 years ago. We had a very highly respected consultant assist us with this, very knowledgeable about the waste disposal field. And this whole organization of costs into different ones that are passed through versus you can earn a profit. And coming up with 8%, there was some discussion, certainly some discussion about that, but the consensus was that 8% made sense. Now, over time, some agencies in the county are 7. The vast majority are 8. And I do think that when we update the rate manual, while I think the basic division of what you can earn a profit on versus what you don't, I think we'll absolutely want to revisit that operating profit margin. Should it be 7? Should it be 6? Should it be 10? In fairness to the trash company, the business is a lot more complex than it was 30 years ago. So maybe something higher than 8% is warranted. All I can tell you is 8% has been the norm, if you will, for a long time. And I know other communities that have a similar model are somewhere around 8. And I think especially in this day and age, when you look at the investment that they have in physical plant and facilities and equipment, it is at risk for them. And it does require, since they're basically doing the rate now, it's going to meet for the next 3 years. They are at risk. If they don't manage their operation well, they're not going to make any money, regardless of the cost pressures. So, Board Member Gray, it's a long time in place. I definitely know it was reasonable in 1994. I believe it's reasonable today, but it is absolutely an area that we need to take a look at. And then the only other comment I would make is, again, you've adopted the rate manual, so have virtually every Waste Connections service area in the county. And this is very consistent with how the rates have been analyzed in the past. And 8% is what the rate manual has.
Thank you, Mr. Statler. Before I come back to you, Director Gray, Mr. Claren has raised his hand, so I'm assuming that he wishes to comment on this particular issue. So, Mr. Claren?
Yeah, thank you, President Howell. Yeah, Dr. Gray, the 8%, as Bill mentioned earlier, it was done 30 years ago in 1994. The solid waste industries definitely has evolved since then, and the 8% is actually below standard. And what we're seeing here is 8% is an allowable cost. When you take out pass-through costs, you're down to 5% profit margin. And then when you include the excluded costs, you're even lower than the 5%. So I just want to give you a little perspective and color on that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Claren. So back to you, Mr. Gray, Director Gray.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, President Howell. Yeah, my other questions, I have a couple of questions that have to do with potential effect of changes in service. One is to sort of add something, one is to sort of take something away, which might be, I'm just kind of curious about what the effect would be if this kind of somehow sweeten things for people a little bit. One question is, MCD does large item pickup twice a year, I believe now. It's a very popular program. And my question on it is it something that could be increased, in other words, made more frequent at the same rate? In other words, not without lowering the rate, but make it maybe quarterly without affecting the overall revenue need. And the other idea, which is a little more, be more of a change, is what would happen if, say, we went to, for say the recyclables, went to bi-weekly pickup for that, a truck would come out every 2 weeks for the blue cans. I'm not suggesting it for the other cans, because you don't want a lot of, trash that sort of ripens sitting around, but paper and so forth. What would that have any effect at all on the revenue needs? This is maybe for Mr. Claren, actually, more than for Mr. Statler, but whoever wants to take it.
Okay, Mr. Claren first then, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yes, Director Gray, going every other week is definitely going to reduce cost. You know, but I think trash would have to stay weekly, and then we could kind of look at it in every other week recycling, but that's going to be a separate decision, something separate conversation, and that will change, definitely change, because right now you have 3 trucks going every week.
Yeah.
You know, if you do something a little bit different where it's green waste one week and recycling the next week, you're going to have 2 trucks. They may take a little bit more, but it gets a little bit more efficient. Where sometimes when you take 3 trucks, they may not get totally full, where if you do one commodity, there's a chance you get more full. So.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Claren. Mr. Statler, did you want to weigh in on this?
You know, I think this is really an excellent Jeff Claren question. I mean, obviously, if you reduce the service level, you're going to reduce costs. What that looks like proportionately in the real world, you would have to defer to. The only point I would make is this level of service is spelled out in your franchise agreement. So if you were going to change that, you would need to amend your franchise agreement. And you would certainly, if you were going to consider that, want to take a look at how much would that reduce rates. And that would be, you know, subsequent financial analysis that I'm confident that Jeff and his staff you know, could do a very good job of analyzing what the savings might or might not be. But as Jeff pointed out, you're not reducing the amount to be collected, you're just reducing its frequency. So, you know, how that plays out, you really have to defer to the people that are, you know, directly in the business and you know, people like Jeff and his staff. But I think they're the best people to really answer that. If you're interested in pursuing it, they're the best people to pursue that for you.
Yeah, I guess that's my other question. I'm sorry, President Howell. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, now please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. That's my other question. I guess that's also the question about large item pickup and making it more frequent. I'm assuming that also would be a change in the franchise agreement, but I'm wondering if that would be something that'd be feasible without changing the need for additional revenue.
Yeah, was that a question or the
question? That's the other question I had about making large item pickup more frequent.
Okay, so does anyone want to answer that?
I can. Yeah. So we actually do the cleanup week twice a year.
Right.
And that what we do is that anybody can kind of put out whatever they want, and some of the big bulky items are actually discounted. So that's what we do twice a year, and that's part of the franchise agreement.
Yeah.
If we're going to increase it, we're going to have to change the franchise agreement. But we do have people can schedule it all year long or whatever they want. It's just during that cleanup week when we dedicate trucks to do that, it's cheaper. It's cheaper for us to do it that way. But if somebody wanted to do a refrigerator, you know, during a non-cleanup week, we do pickups. We just charge what it should be, because we're only doing a separate truck going out there to pick that up. Whereas during a cleanup week, we have a truck there and we're just driving around all the neighborhoods to make sure to pick up whatever's left on the curb. But it would probably be, you know, if we did want more cleanup weeks, then yeah, we'd probably have to talk about that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Claren.
Thank you.
Mr. Gray, so you got all your questions?
Yep.
Thanks for the time being. Okay, let's see, who's next? Oh, Director Steidel, you're next.
Thank you, President Howell. Mr. Claren, just for clarification, if somebody wanted to have a refrigerator picked up, I know there's a fee and you can call ahead to do the pickup, but you're not saying that an individual truck is sent out for that item, are you? I mean, I'm assuming that they would at least coordinate, you know, every 2 weeks, it would be, okay, we've got these calls for these 10 things and they can all be picked up at the same time.
Usually when we do it, we schedule within that week.
Okay.
Yeah, we schedule it within the week. We have a delivery service person that actually picks up, exchanges containers, and if there's a bulky item pickup, we schedule it and it's picked up during that week. We try to schedule it within 24 hours, 48 hours.
Oh, okay. So it isn't so much a truck as it
Stardale.
isn't like a garbage truck. It's a truck that has the trailer carrier behind it with the trade out bins.
It depends on what it is. Sometimes if it's a small enough item that can fit in one of those rear loaders, we'll do it in. But metal, if it's a metal item like a refrigerator or a stove, we send a delivery truck driver who has got a flatbed and a tailgate on it.
Okay, thank you, sir. And Director Howell, I just had one more question to Ms. Duffield, if I may.
Okay, we're losing control here.
No, I just wanted to get Ms. Duffield, could you give me a take, please, on where we are as far as the volume on our franchise fees?
Okay, Ms. Duffield, yeah, go ahead.
Sure. So this fiscal year, so far, we've had a budget, or actually for 21, 22 is what I should clarify. We had a budget of 118,000. And so far, 96,000 has been collected. There is still the franchise fees for the month of May, or sorry, for the month of June that are still in process. We expect those to be at the district any day, and we'll have to make a year-end adjustment for that.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, and remember going forward, please let me recognize you before you chime in here, just so that we can keep things moving very smoothly. Okay, Director, Vice President Dean, please.
Hi, I want to thank Mr. Statler for his very thorough analysis. One thing we did not talk about, and I know it wasn't to be part of Mr. Statler's analysis, I guess, was the IWMA fee. So can we hear a little bit about that?
I think that's probably, I'm going to chime in here. I think that is scheduled, but it's a separate item. Do you want to really jump into that right now? Can we just deal with Mr. Statler's report first and then come back to that, Vice President?
Sure.
Yeah, but let's not lose that because that's important. Director Farmer, your hand is up.
Sorry about that. Thank you, President Howell.
No
I just want to add a little humor here if I can do that. Watching Mr. Statler, I'm just curious if he's able to make this presentation without any hand gestures. Has it ever been done? I think it's awesome the way you do it, but also appreciate the quotes from Mencken and H.L. Mencken and Judy Collins. It's like the 2 drops of honey in the tablespoon of castor oil, if you understand what I'm saying. So I've got a couple of things that I want to ask about. First off, Cambria is a retirement community. A lot of single folks on fixed incomes live here, or lower income, let's say. And I believe that other communities have available 20-gallon trash cans because folks just don't have that much to be picked up. And those have a less cost. And maybe Mr. Claren is a person to answer this. Is that possible to be done here in Cambria? And also I want to ask about the trucks. Oh, first off, I want to make a statement that the people that pick up the trash, they're all well-mannered. They're really thoughtful in how they return the cans after they pick them up. It's very much appreciated, I believe, by every resident that lives in this community. But with regard to the vehicles themselves, are they still on gas or diesel, as the case may be, or are we now utilizing natural gas, which is of course less polluting, I believe?
Okay, thank you, Director Farmer. So yes, Mr. Claren, I think these are to you, yes? So
Thank you. Thank you, Director Farmer. I really appreciate that. You know, our operating staff would love to hear those comments. I'll definitely share it with them. They do take pride in their job and service. So I appreciate that comment from you. The one thing first is let's just talk about the 20-gallon cans. Unfortunately, the way the Cambria streets are kind of lined up, we do not have any what we call side loaders, which actually can help pick up those 20 gallons. We have those rear loaders, and those rear loaders, they have a lip on them that that you can pick a minimum of 32 gallons. As a 20-gallon, it doesn't quite fit that lip. And then in this day of age, with kind of our saving on workman's comp, we don't allow people just dumping them by hand. So that's one of the bigger reasons why 20 gallons aren't there. And the other portion of the diesel versus compressed natural gas, we do have some compressed natural gas, but unfortunately, Cambria is just too far. There's not a fill station enough for us to do it. We can get there and collect it, but we won't be able to get back.
Get home.
Unfortunately, I think the farthest we've gone is kind of Morro Bay, but going to Cambria, we won't make it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Claren.
Thank you.
Dr. Steidel.
Thank you, President Howell. I have a suggestion. As the real focus towards this agenda item, although there may be all kinds of interesting conversations and discussions and questions, is the consideration for scheduling a Prop 218 hearing date. And perhaps if we focus toward doing that and resolving that for this agenda item, then we'd be in a position to gauge how much more time we would have for addressing any additional questions.
I think that's a very good idea. But I do have one quickie. I think we can get a quick answer to, just to follow up on Director Gray's question, and then I'd like to deal exactly with what you're speaking of. Can what we're doing today, as we go forward with these rates, and we go through the whole process, is that, I guess what I'm asking is, can we then deal with the franchise agreement? Because can that be modified, assuming we go forward with the rates, the 218 succeed, fails, and the rates go forward? Is the franchise agreement still something that we can negotiate in terms of like the number of pickups and the kind of things that were being asked, or do we have to deal with that as well at this time? Anybody?
We don't deal with the franchise agreement right now.
Okay.
It has nothing to do with this application for a rate increase.
Good. Thank you. So now back to Director Steidel's point. So yeah, it seems to me we have, I'm trying to remember, I had some discussions here about this with the general manager. The essential thing is we need to schedule the hearing so that the process can go forward. There are two other questions that I see. One, and I don't know if this is part of the hearing or whether it's a separate issue, is how we handle the retroactive payment. Do we need to decide that today as well? That's a question. I think that's probably for Mr. Carmel. And then the next thing is the IWMA fee, the IRWMA fee, which is a separate fee with a separate entity. My understanding, it is not subject to the 218 process. And so we don't need to schedule a hearing for that. So the issue would be, how do we pay for it? And again, what kind of amortization, if any, are we going to use? Now, have I stated that? Mr. Statler, I think you had a thought, and then Mr. Carmel.
I don't believe you have to deal with the IWMA issue right now. There might be some difference of opinion between Waste Connections and myself and the district council, but that's already been adopted. That was adopted back in March. So that's not really on anyone's agenda right now, this minute. And it is effective July 1. I don't believe that maybe something that Waste Connections MCD wants to mention in their rate notice, as they have in other communities, but that's not really an issue for you to decide. And in terms of the Waste Management Authority, they've already made that decision, 4 or 5 months ago. On the retroactivity issue, that I believe, at least for the purpose of the notice, yes, you need to decide that now, because they need to include that in the notice. That is definitely a rate increase or rate change they will be doing. They won't be doing the Waste Management Authority rate increase, but it's definitely an increase they'll be doing. So they need direction on that. Certainly your district council can chime in on this, but it's important to keep in mind, if you send this rate notice out, you could always, if circumstances warrant it, adopt a lower rate. Maybe you are able to get some difference in the service level or whatever, and by the time the rate hearing happens, for whatever reason, you're able to reach agreement on service level changes or rate changes that make them lower. You can always adopt a lower rate. What you cannot do without renoticing is adopt a higher rate. So in terms of the scheduling, even if today you may have some reservations about December 31st, and you really think, allocating over a longer period, if you advertise for the higher rate, you certainly would have the ability at the rate hearing to pick the lower one. What you won't have the ability to do, if you notice the lower rate or the longer amortization, you won't be able at that rate hearing to go to the faster amortization. So just two things to keep in mind. This isn't about approving rates. This is about the notice that goes out and what should be in the notice. And just keeping in mind, you can always adopt a lower rate, but without renoticing, you can't adopt a higher one.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Statler. Mr. Carmel, did you want to add?
I just wanted to sort of focus in on the IWMA fee just for a moment. It's a fee that's established by a separate regulatory agency. It has nothing to do with this rate increase. There's no requirement that it be included on our Prop 218 notice. It's not our fee. We have no requirement to authorize its collection. It's imposed by the IWMA. It could have been included on their bill in July. They chose not to include it. It doesn't take us saying you can impose that. It takes the IWMA telling them they have to impose it. So I don't think it's an issue for today, period. And I know Jeff's going to disagree with that. From a legal perspective, that's what I think about the IWMA fee. It has to be paid, but it's not relevant to this discussion. And then with regard to what you have to do today, yeah, you have to look at the core rate that's being recommended, the 41.46%, and either agree or disagree with the analysis that's been given by Mr. Statler. And then you need to pick a start date for the temporary delayed implementation rate increase. He's recommending July 1st. I concur with it, but it's up to you. And an effective date of October 1st. And then the amortization period, whether it should be 3 months to December 31st or 6 months to March 31st or something else. Those are the elements we need in order to leave here. And the garbage company will then prepare the 218 notice, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Carmel. Before I call on you, Mr. Claren, I just want to clarify with Mr. Carmel. So what the issue regarding the IRWMA rate, there is an issue about, again, the retroactive, how we handle the retroactive part of that. But that can be, am I understanding you correctly, that can be discussed in as another agenda item at another meeting?
Well, again, I don't think there is an issue with retroactivity. It went into effect July 1st. It could have been collected on their July bill. It wasn't. For whatever reason, they didn't include it. They can include it on their August bill. They can include it on their September bill. It doesn't take us telling them, you can put this on your bill. It's not our fee. So I have a disagreement as to whether this is relevant to any discussion. I understand that Mr. Claren wants to talk about it, and perhaps he can be very convincing and change your or my mind. But I've also discussed this with other people and with Mr. Statler extensively, and that's my legal opinion with regard to the IWMA fee.
Okay. Again, before I let you go, so because it had been raised with Mr. Weigold that we could have a choice as to whether to pay for that out of the general fund, because we're owing about $30,000 to them now. And do we pay that out of the general fund, or do we just let them bill for it? But do we need to do that today?
I'm not making much sense. It's not relevant to this discussion. It's not our obligation. We have no obligation to pay it. They have an obligation to collect it, but it doesn't come from us. It comes from their gross receipts. So to me, it's not relevant to this discussion. You won't have to revisit it unless you want to. Now, that doesn't mean you can't feel sorry for them and say, we'd like to contribute X number of dollars. With regard to August's, it can still go on their August bill. So I don't know where he comes up with $30,000. They missed out on the $10,000 that should have been collected in July. To me, that can still be collected. It's still owing in theory, and it can still be put on their August bill. Explaining why this is anything we would be looking at, I don't understand.
Okay, I think I understand. So, but I do think we need to hear from Mr. Claren because his point of view, but it looks like we don't have to deal with the IRWMA today, is what I'm hearing. So, but yes, please go ahead, Mr. Claren.
Yeah, this IWMA fee has been kind of known since March, and we've been kind of talking with the district and so forth. And what we've been doing with all the other districts and the jurisdictions, in the franchise fees, we don't change rates unless we get kind of something from the district to do so. And when this 5.4 came up, we brought it up to see where we can. And I think the determination that Mr. Carmel is doing, he's saying that we can do it now. So to me, I think we can do it, and that's fine. But some of their districts wanted to do different things where they wanted to provide me a letter. Some of their districts wanted to wait till the Prop 218 hearing before they did it. And, so I'm good with this. If Mr. Carmel is saying that, then we'll definitely do it on our next building.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So I think we can focus then on we can leave if you don't mind, Vice President, we can leave the IRWMA to a discussion at another time.
I totally understand what Mr. Carmel was saying, and I agree. Thank you.
Good, good. So we're clear on that. So now, Mr. Gray, direct.
Thank you. I want to be really clear about this though, because I think the number we have for the new rate, the increase that we were talking about, does that rate, the one that raises the container to $36, whatever it is, 95 cents, that sort of thing, does it include the IWMA, or is it does not include the IWMA? The 41% does not include the IWMA. Okay, yes, correct. It seems to me the two things we just have to deal with today then are the if we putting the notice out, and also deciding on the retroactivity and what we want to say about the retroactivity in that notice, right? Because that we have to say it's going to be 3 months retroactivity, and then how to explain that in the notice, or 6 months, or whatever. Those are the two things I guess we have to decide today.
And the core rate itself.
And the core rate itself, yeah.
So I think maybe the easiest way to handle this, we are going to need to take public comment, but I think what we need is a motion on the floor, and then we'll kind of go from there. Yes, Mr. Statler, and then Director Steidel.
Yeah, I do believe for the purpose of the 218 notice, you have to address the core rate, at least for noticing, is it the 41.46%? But I believe you also, as the other agencies have done, you need to notice what the retro or what the temporary delayed rate will be as well, because whatever gets approved is, when it goes into effect October 1st, they're going to be billing for both the core rate and the retroactive rate. And I think, as the district council, Tim Parmel, pointed out, that means you need to decide on the retro date, effective date. Looks to me like the effective date of the rate increase is going to be October 1st, and you need to decide the amortization period. From there, Waste Connections will be able to figure out how to do the notice, but they really need to know the retro start date, the effective date of the rate increase, and when does it end?
Right. Right. So as I see it, there's 4 items: the rate itself, and then there's 2 other items: the start date, the effective date, and the amortization period. Is that right? Okay, Director Steidel, I think we're clear now, I think, as to where we're going. Go ahead.
Mute.
Yes, and actually the final piece to that is to set the date for the Prop 218.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I think perhaps if we take them in segments,
yes,
and address them, that will lead to less confusion. So it seems to me that the first piece of this is whether we have an agreement on the core rate of the 41.46%. And so my motion is that we accept the 41.46 core rate on the basis of the analysis provided to us by Mr. Statler in his report, and proceed as appropriate.
Okay, second to that?
I'll second. Well,
Vice President Dean beat you to the...
You got there first. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, very good. So it's been moved and seconded to accept the, I'm sorry, where is that?
So to accept the 41.4% rate on the basis of the analysis provided to us by Mr. Statler in his report.
Thank you, thank you. So it's a good thing this is being transcribed. So Leah, did you get the substance of that?
Yes, I did.
Thank you. All right, before we move forward, Mr. Carmel, I think this is to you. We do need to take public comment on this item, but I don't want to take public comment on every motion. So I'm thinking...
I think this is a good time to pause and just take public comment.
Yeah.
I think... But bearing in mind where we're going, so don't forget, let's not forget the motion that's on the floor while we take public comment. And the other thing, before we take public comment, Mr. Carmel, if you could say once more, for the benefit of anybody out there, what discretion, if any, do we have on any of this?
I mean, in terms of establishing rates?
The rate itself, I guess. We have discretion in the other areas, but do we have any discretion about the rate that's being proposed?
You have absolute discretion, with the caveat that you'll need some underlying analysis to change it, not necessarily to lower it, but certainly to increase it beyond what's being recommended by your consultant. Other than that, you have broad discretion, but it's only to move it down. And if you're going to move it up, you're going to have some justification, some factual basis to do so.
Okay, okay. Just wanted to get clarity for the public as they're commenting on this. Okay, folks, this is your shot. Oh, I'm sorry. Seidel, go ahead.
The one concern I would have in the idea that lowering it somehow doesn't equate to the same kind of analysis as raising it. The other thing is that there's risk that lies on the other side of lowering it because of the very complete and specific analysis that Mr. Statler did. By lowering it, we in essence would be indicating that to MCD that we are not willing to cover the costs that they have identified for us. And so they may choose to reduce service to us commensurate with that. And then we would be left with trying to find a way to deal with a piece of the puzzle that we have to go find somebody else to take care of now. And that's going to cost money. So the practicality of lowering it, I think, is something that would need to be significantly considered as a risk and taken under consideration for that.
Mm-hmm.
Indeed, and that's what I wanted to get clarity, and you did it, I think, is that any lowering would probably entail a lowering of service.
Right.
Okay, having said that, let's move to the public, and I see Dr. Bettenhausen. No one else so far is choosing to speak, so please bring Dr. Bettenhausen in.
Thank you very much, President Howell. I appreciate the reference just now to this puzzle, which I think is a good metaphor for this proposal. And I thank Mr. Statler for what I find every time he does this, an excellent analysis and description, if not exactly terse. But I do have something I want to point out, and that is that if you vote for this and announce the Prop 218 hearing, I hope that you make explicit somewhere in there why the IWMA was included so much in the analysis, even though it is not taken into consideration on fees and whether you should raise the fees. And I say that because there is significant revenue from IWMA, remembering the acronyms always a challenge for me, in this report. Now, I didn't have time to go back and look again at this, listening to your discussion, but I think it's still, I appreciate the various questions that have been asked by Director Gray and others. To what degree does the rate increase reflect any fiscal consideration of the possible IWMA fees? And will the bill for Mission County disposal include somehow those fees that the ratepayers have to pay to IWMA? I could be getting tired, and I'm going to take a little break before I watch the January 6th hearing, but I want to assure you all that even though I try to do good work in analyzing this stuff in agendas, this one was a bit of a challenge. Why that kept showing up, but then it said it wasn't taken into account for this fee proposal. So please clarify that in your announcement of the Prop 218 public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bettenhausen. Any additional public comment? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Leah, do we have any? Ms. Riedel, do we have any written public comment on this?
I'm sorry, I'm looking now. I'm multitasking. Okay. There are no new written comments.
Thank you, thank you. So we're now back to the board, and I think Dr. Bettenhausen's words, which will I request, I hope that that will be included in the notice. So having said that, let's go to the motion, which, if I want to remind you, is to accept the rate as proposed, which slight amendment. It's actually 41.46% on page 118. Okay.
Right. That's the number I used, I believe.
So I just heard the point 4 and not a problem. So we're all in agreement then. So the motion is to adopt that. You need to, I'm sorry, you need to remind me, was there more than just adopting that? That's our first step, right?
Well, I termed it that it was adopting, approving the core rate of 41.46% on the basis of the analysis provided by Mr. Statler
Excellent.
in his report.
And can I clarify that? That's the rate to be included in the Prop 218.
We're not adopting it.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we, but we can still keep the language, or do we need to change the language of the motion?
Well, rather than if there's any term to adoption or approval, it's more that the inclusion of the core rate of 41.46% basis of the analysis.
Okay.
By Mr. Stadler in the Prop 218 notification.
I think that does it. So as long as it's clear, and people can come back and look. Okay. I think, do we need, then there was a second. So I think we're ready. Any debate on this? Not seeing any. Okay. So I think we're ready for the roll call on this one. So Leah.
Okay. Director Stidel.
Yes.
Director Stidel, aye. Vice President Dean?
Aye.
Vice President Dean, aye. Director Farmer?
Aye.
Director Farmer, aye. Director Gray?
Aye.
Director Gray, aye. And President Howell?
Aye.
President Howell, aye. The motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. So now we have accepted, we have agreed, and that the rate notice shall include that core rate of 41.46%. So now we need to deal with we have 3 things, as I say: the start date, the effective date, and the amortization date. I guess we should probably start with the start date, meaning I'm not clear. Why is the start date different from the effective date? Somebody help me on this. Mr. Stadler, please.
Yeah, the difference is, when does the retro period start?
Got it.
That's the July 1st date. But then it's, what's the effective date of the rate increase? And I think that's, the way you have this scheduled, my guess is the rate increase can be, given the 45-day notice, October 1st is probably the first date. And the reason why that's important is calculating what the rate increase needs to be depends on when the retro start date happens and when it becomes effective. It does seem to me, although you certainly have discretion here, that based on where we're at in this process, my recommendation, at least those first 2, would be July 1st is the start date, October 1st is the effective date for the purpose of calculating that. I think where you have the most leeway, if you will, where you really need to apply judgment is everyone else that's done this ended at December 31st with that would mean a 3-month amortization period. If you wanted to extend it, the same amount of money is going to be collected. It just means it gets collected over a longer period of time than a shorter period of time. If we have those 3 elements, then Waste Connections will be able to calculate what that fee needs to be. Now, I've given you my estimate in the report, but at the end of the day, those are the 3 factors that would determine what that temporary delayed rate would be.
Oh, thank you. I see 2 of you there to speak, but may I offer a suggestion that we first start the start date and the effective date, and then go to the amortization. Yeah, let me see. I don't remember who's first. I'll take Director Gray first. Sorry.
Okay. I was going to make a motion. I don't know if we can do all 3 in a motion, but if you want to keep it simple, I'll move that we in our notification for the Prop 218 hearing, we include a start date of July 1st and an effective date of October 1st.
Excellent.
I'll stop it at that, and then we can deal with the amortization in the 3rd motion.
Very good move, I think. Yes. Sorry to editorialize there. Is that a second, Director Seidel?
Yes, it is. In fact, the exact same thing I was going to suggest.
Okay. So it's,
If I could add to the end of that, for the temporary delayed implementation rate increase. So you have
That's fine.
confidence.
hey, okay, I'm not quite sure where the wording fits. So
At the end.
at the end. So, okay, we need your help again. So let's, where are we on this?
Start date of July 1st.
That's for the temporary delayed rate increase, right?
That's right.
Okay, and then an effective date for the rate increase of October 1st. I mean, the forward rate increase of October 1st. I guess we're talking about.
I thought I understood until that. Go ahead, Director Steidel. Sorry.
But the effective date is the case period.
Right. Yeah. It's
Right. So I mean, it's just the effective date.
Okay.
Whatever that relates to in terms of timeline or how we're going to end up choosing the amortization.
Right. I think if we get this done, then the amortization, which is where more discussion might take place. So I think then the motion is to establish the start date of July 1st and an effective date of October 1st for this is where we insert Mr. Carmel's word. So Mr. Carmel, for the what again?
Temporary delayed implementation rate increase.
For the temporary delayed
implementation rate increase.
Boy, do I not? I'll accept that. I'll understand it. Then it's okay. I'm having trouble, but that's okay. It'll probably eventually.
So I'll second if that hasn't already happened.
And again, it's been moved and seconded then to establish July 1st as the start date and October 1st as the effective date of the temporary effective
temporary delayed implementation rate increase.
Got that, Ms. Riedel?
Yes, I do.
I'm not going to repeat it again. Okay, is there any debate? Okay, seeing none, I believe we're ready for the question. So call the roll, Ms. Riedel.
Okay, Director Gray.
Aye.
Director Gray, aye. Director Steidel.
Aye.
Director Steidel, aye. Director Farmer.
Aye.
Director Farmer, aye. Vice President Dean.
Aye.
Vice President Dean, aye. And President Howell.
Aye.
President Howell, aye. The motion passes 5-0.
5-0. Okay. Now, having done that, it's just simply a matter of establishing the amortization period. So I'll entertain anyone who want to make a suggestion. Let's do it with a motion. We can go from there. Yeah, Director Gray.
Yeah, I'll move that the amortization period end on December 31st, 2022.
Okay, it's been moved. Is there a second on that one? Not seeing us here. Okay, let's try. Shall we try for the longer period and see what we get?
So I move March 31st, 2023.
Let's try that. Is there a second on that one? Hi, okay, now we got a second. Okay, it's been moved and seconded that the amortization period cease on, what would we say, March 20?
Or the amortization period extend to March 31st, 2023. It's like it's three bills basically people would get, yeah, that are higher.
So
bi-monthly.
Yeah. Okay, we got that. It's been moved and seconded that the amortization period. Why, man, it's just, I think it's
extend to March 31st, 2023.
Extend is the word, yeah. Extend through March 31st. Okay, is there any debate on this? Gee, I don't see any. Okay. All right, I guess we're ready for the roll call, Ms. Riedel, on this one.
I just need to confirm, was it Director Steidel who seconded that motion?
Yes.
It was.
Thank
No,
you.
I'm sorry. I haven't had it, but
Vice
President Dean did.
Thank you. Okay, so then Director Gray.
Aye.
Director Gray, aye. Vice President Dean.
Aye.
Vice President Dean, aye. Director Farmer.
Aye.
Director Farmer, aye. Director Steidel.
Aye.
Director Steidel, aye. And President Howell.
Aye.
President Howell, aye.
Motion passes 5-0. So we are, yes, Mr. Statler.
Just a very short comment before I leave. I have to head on down the road to Cayucas. But I did want to thank you for your obviously very thoughtful consideration of this issue. Very complicated, very difficult, I'm sure, for you to weigh the, community interests, and really for your very thoughtful questions. This has been, may not come up. I just wanted, this has been a very rewarding experience for me. And I thank the board for their very thoughtful consideration of this issue. And with that, I'm going to wish you well on the other two items on your agenda. But I have to get to Cayucas. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mr. Sattler.
Thank you for your excellent work. All right.
I got a quick question on this agenda item.
Yeah. Next.
Do we also have to set a actual schedule?
Yes, we have to set the date.
We have to schedule a date, don't we?
Oh, right. Right. Thank you. Thank you. That's very important. So what soonest that we can do that hearing? Does anybody have a calendar in front of them?
Suggest Mr. Weigel may have been able to, work out the dynamics of paperwork on how we need to respond. And so perhaps he can give us an indication.
Thank you. That's excellent. Yes, Michael, have you thought about this?
Yes, President Howell, in the board package, we recommended September 15 board meeting, and that works with Jeff Claren, I believe, as well. Is that Jeff? Thumbs up?
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, that's very good. So to repeat that, to September. Yeah, my short-term memory seems to have disappeared. What was the date of the meeting?
September 15.
Thank you. The Ides of September. Okay, I can remember that. All right, so let's have a motion then for that.
I move that the hearing be set for September 15th.
All right, and a second. I see your hand.
Yeah, no, I'm not muted. I may want to extend that to define it for the prop 218. I mean, to identify it.
Oh, I did. Okay, yeah. I would move that the Prop 218 hearing date for the proposed Mission Country disposal, solid waste collection and disposal rate increase be set for September 15th, 2022.
Excellent. Okay, I see a bunch of nods. Anybody want to actually officially second it? Okay, Director Steidel. Again, I'm not going to try to repeat the whole thing, but it's been moved and seconded that the hearing date be September 15th. And then with all the other words that were in there. Okay, so again, is there any debate on this? Oh, okay. Any debate? Anybody want to talk about this? Okay.
Can I clarify that be at 1 p.m.?
Oh, good point. Yes, that needs to be in there.
At 1 p.m. Yeah, that's
okay. A friendly amendment.
I accept that change.
Okay, accepted by the second, no doubt. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So the motion is amended. Is that the hearing date will be set for the, and then insert the appropriate description. Will be at 1 o'clock on September 15th. Okay. So is there any debate? Seeing none, I think we're ready for the question. So Ms. Liddell, we're ready for you.
Okay, Director Gray.
Aye.
Director Gray, aye. Director Steidel.
Aye.
Director Steidel, aye. Director Farmer.
Aye.
Director Farmer, aye. Vice President Dean.
Aye.
Vice President Dean, aye. And President Howell.
Aye.
President Howell, aye.
Excellent. Motion passes 5-0. So at this point, we're ready for the last agenda items, but I don't think we can complete them in the 4 minutes, the 6 minutes that are left. My suggestion, yeah, go ahead, Director Gray.
I propose we extend the meeting to 5 o'clock.
I don't think we're going to get a, yeah.
It's to test that. We don't want to do that.
I think
5. We got, well, we're at, yeah, we're at 4:40 now.
I don't know. Personally, I would rather go ahead and just table these until the next meeting because they're very short. I think, yeah, it's cutting
Yeah,
it close. Yeah, otherwise, if it weren't that, I think we might be able to get it to 5, but then folks need to gather their forces and in order to watch the night's entertainment here. Yeah, go ahead, Vice President Dean.
We could probably already do agenda item 7B because it's just forming an ad hoc committee and you already know who wants to be on that ad hoc committee, but I suggest we table the strategic plan to the next meeting because we also needed to discuss the core values.
That is true, and I think we'll have some public interaction on that. We could do 7B, take public comment on it. So that's, go ahead, GM Weigel.
I'd suggest just, I don't know what the proper terminology is, cancel 7A and just pick it up because we normally do a review of the strategic plan the second meeting of every month. So we can just pick it up rather than reschedule it to the next meeting.
I think we could do that.
Probably have to vote on it.
Yeah, it amounts to tabling it. I think we've just tabled it indefinitely and then let it come back on its own. Is that all right?
Fine with me. Yeah.
Because we do have to take some action. I think we can't just sort of walk away from it. So can we have a motion to, you can actually move to table both items if you want. Does anybody want to do that? I need a motion to table. Yeah, go ahead.
I move we table, I guess we move we table item 7A and 7B.
Okay,
So,
second. Yeah, just leave it, yeah, okay, seconded by Green. Rather than a day certain, we can just do it and they will come back on their own, so I don't think we need to worry. So it's been moved in second to table items 7B and 7C.
A and B, I believe.
A and B, yeah, 7A and 7B.
A and B, thank you. Oh, we can't stop this too soon. So, okay. Is there any debate? Okay, so no debate.
There's public comment.
Yeah, but we're not.
Here's one, yeah.
Mr. Dudzik, the item has been tabled and will come back. You can anticipate it. Right now, I'm thinking in our next regular meeting, which will be, I believe, August 7th. But we're not prepared at this point because it's simply not. It's been tabled. So we will not be discussing it today. Thank you for waiting so long. I appreciate your hanging out there. Okay, anybody else? Okay, I think we're ready for a vote on this. It's been moved and seconded to table items 7A and 7B. Do we have we need a roll call.
Okay, Director Gray.
Aye.
Director Gray, aye. Vice President Dean.
Aye.
Vice President Dean, aye. Director Farmer.
Aye.
Director Farmer, aye. Director Stidel.
Aye.
Director Stidel, aye. And President Howell.
Aye.
President Howell, aye.
Motion passes 5-0. So those items will be tabled. They were very likely to be coming back at our next meeting, though. Yes, Director Farmer.
It's not a big deal, but you just mentioned, you just referenced the fact that our next meeting was August 7th. It's actually August 11th.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, August 11th. So nobody come here on the 7th. There won't be anybody meeting. Okay, so unless we don't really have time to take much in the way of future agendas, I don't think, Director Gray?
I just wanted to comment, this is following up on 7C. I do think as a future agenda item, revisiting the franchise agreement and maybe doing an analysis of it, basically looking and see what we might be able to save with service changes or additions to service and doing that fairly soon so that people will know we're looking into that. I think that might be a good item for even the next meeting. So.
Okay. Okay, I've got that one down. We've got a couple of minutes and let's see if anybody else wants to. Director Farmer, I already got what you had mentioned earlier about the water stages. So anybody else have anything we want to add? Okay, I think we're about ready to adjourn here. And thank you, Mr. Claren, for joining us today. We'll look forward to, I think we'll probably have additional interactions with you. So we're looking forward to that. Thank you very much. And thank you, everybody who's patiently sat out there and watched us. And thank you, everybody here. So at that, I think we can all did a good job today. So without objection, I'll declare this meeting adjourned.
Everybody have a good weekend.
Have a good weekend, everybody. Yes.